Welcome, everyone. I now call the July 16th, 2024 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we'll take a moment to take a roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name. City clerk?
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Councilmember Zorns?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alderks?
Here.
Councilmember Curd?
Here.
Councilmember Menke?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Before we continue with the rest of the meeting, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And there's no council attending remotely. First up is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to the meeting agenda? I am going to pull Agenda Bill 24115, the resolution to approve Amendment Number 2 to the Professional Services Agreement with MXM Landscape Architecture for final design of vehicle barriers for the Main and Festival Street improvements project. We all cool with that? Cool. I see nods. Do we need a vote? Awesome.
No. I think all it takes is one. So
Okay.
we counted there.
Perfect. All right, seeing no more, I will move on to public engagement opportunities. We have the Bloodworks Northwest Blood Drive on July 17th and 18th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. right here in Bothell Council Chambers. You can donate at City Hall's mobile blood bank and give the gift of life. You can sign up for an appointment. We have the Makers on Main Street, Friday, July 19th from 6 to 9 p.m., Main Street and 101st Avenue Northeast. We're going to have an outdoor night market where attendees can shop, dine, gather, and listen to live music from Kelly Bradley Band and Brian James. And we've got National Night Out on Tuesday, August 6th, a community building event where you can plan a neighborhood block party and optionally invite a Bothell PD officer to attend, and you can register your event on the city website. Next up is public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but upon the advice of our city attorney, we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City clerk.
Thank you. We do have a number of people that signed up, submitted written comment. I'll go through those first. And these have all been made part of the record. Jesse Blanche wrote in regarding the letter of interest with Bothell Urban Methodist Church. Marty Penhaligen also wrote in regarding the LOI with the Bothell United Methodist Church. Sarah Arndt wrote in regarding the LOI with Bothell Municipal Methodist Church. Ray Thomas also wrote in regarding the LOI with Bothell United Methodist Church. Dennis Sullivan wrote in regarding the same. Mary Evans wrote in regarding the comprehensive plan. Sylvia Cunningham wrote in regarding the LOI with Bothell United Methodist Church. And Sarah Gustafson wrote in regarding the LOI with Bothell United Methodist Church. I have a number of people that signed up to speak tonight at the meeting. And before I start calling on people, I'm just going to say that public comments shall be limited to the topics concerning current, future, or requested city projects, actions, programs, plans, and regulations. Comments not pertaining to these subject matters are not germane and may result in the speaker's comments being suspended. When your 3 minutes start, the light at the dais will turn green. At 1 minute left, it will start blinking, and at 30 seconds left, it will turn yellow. The first person I have is Martin Lewin, and he is virtual, so I'm going to promote him. Hello, Martin, can you hear us?
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Martin Long, and I am the Director of Acquisitions and Planning here at Bridge Housing. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer, owner, and property manager. Thank you for having us today. I'm here to speak in support of the proposed purchase and sale agreement with Bothell United Methodist Church. As members of the council know, we have been partners with the congregation and the church, as well as their affiliated nonprofit, Northwest Community Solutions, for the past 2.5 years. And we're really excited for this moment today because I think the timing for this could not be any better. As many of you on the diocese know, affordable housing project is very, very difficult to finance and build. And we are at a very, very opportune moment in that not just the county, but also a regional coalition for housing, as well as the state commerce department, as well as 2 or 3 other funders are all looking for funding applications this coming September. So I think your support today for this purchase and sale is really the beginning of what will be a long but important journey for us to secure funding at the county as well as state level. So we really appreciate your commitment to affordable housing, and also wanted to highlight the fact that this vision for 201 units of affordable housing is squarely in line with the 2040 vision that the council had laid out earlier last year for a diversity of housing types as well as income levels throughout the city, and making sure that Bothell becomes a home for a diverse range of folks, including many families who may or may not have the chance without this project to live in a place as beautiful as Bothell. So we appreciate your support and look forward to working with Bothell United Methodist Church as well as the city to advance this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Barbara Bailey.
Okay, so I'm Barbara Bailey, and I'm a member of the Bothell Urban Team from the United Methodist Church in Bothell. I live in Kenmore, but I spend a lot of time in Bothell shopping, eating, worshiping. My address before Kenmore became a city was Bothell, and I've been a resident for 50 years. At BUMC, Bothell United Methodist Church, we're called to help others, whether it's globally or locally. We want people to have access to affordable housing. As single-family home prices, condo prices, and apartment rentals escalate, there are more and more people being priced out of housing. We've joined forces with a well-known nonprofit in affordable house building, and that's Bridge. Together, we offer the city and its people affordable housing for those in our city and those who would like to be in our city. There's no hidden agenda, no strings attached. We just simply want people to have a place to live, to work, to play. Additional amenities to the city and the people of Bothell is a gathering place for all, job training and social services. We're asking the Bothell City Council to say yes to this project and give us exclusive negotiating rights for the property. It's a win-win for the city and the people of Bothell. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Jane Jagodzinski. Mary Jane, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mary Jane, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can barely hear you. You're going to have to speak louder, I think.
All right.
There you
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right.
Thank you. You'll have 3
All right.
minutes.
I'll use my big voice. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, staff. I'm Mary Jane Jagodzinski, and I'm Senior Vice President of Development with Bridge Housing. Thank you for the opportunity to express our support for item 8A regarding the letter of intent with Bothell United Methodist Church. Three comments I would like to briefly make. I think there's 3 points. I believe that this is the right time. My colleague Martin Long did express the urgency of moving forward with funding windows, which are always difficult to navigate. But beyond that, I think that, later today, council is considering the study session for the comp plan update. And affordable housing in this location, I believe, is consistent with that. It's bringing a variety of housing types, serving a spectrum of incomes. Within the cities, the King County portion, you have a need of about 6,000 units over the next 20 years, and this is an opportunity to add homes. I believe, secondly, this is the right place. The site has been identified by the city for affordable apartments for good reason. It's infill, which strengthens resilience. It's walkable, it's close to amenities, and it's a cornerstone for the community resources to further build a vibrant and inclusive city center. Families, we are planning half of the apartments at 2 and 3 bedroom. And lastly, respectfully, I believe this is the right team. Bothell Unified Methodist Church is a pioneer of this community. It has worked beyond just having good intentions to really problem solve and bring this. We partnered with them for over the last 2 years, as we have done successfully with other churches, trying to turn an aspiration and a vision into a reality for working families and seniors. In our 41-year history as a nonprofit developer and owner of affordable apartments, we believe that Bridge Housing, in partnership with the church, brings the acumen and the financial strength to be able to succeed. And with that, I just respectfully again ask your approval of the resolution on your agenda in item 8A. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alan Jacobson.
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Alan Jacobson, as stated, and I want to thank you for allowing me to speak for the agenda item regarding the letter of intent with Bothell United Methodist Church. I've been involved with this project since its inception, so obviously I support the project. But I do want to highlight some important points about the project and about Bothell United Methodist Church. As many of you know, Bothell UMC has been a long-standing member of the Bothell community, being founded even before the city was initially incorporated. We have real roots in this community. When we originally set out defining the project, we spent time understanding the needs of the Bothell community, some of which were affordable housing, a space for people to gather and feel a sense of community as the population grows, and a place to meet face-to-face with human service provider representatives instead of having to just do it online or travel to other cities. Early on, we developed a set of criteria for development partners and then sent out an RFP to numerous affordable housing developers. The selected partners not only had demonstrated success in developing affordable housing, but also in maintaining them as affordable units over the long term. At the start of communicating with the city on this project, we provided an unsolicited proposal for a portion of the city center lot, but were asked to consider working with Sound Transit on a portion of Lot P South. We agreed and pivoted to that property and began working with Sound Transit. When Sound Transit pulled out, the city asked us to consider another proposal giving another proposal for all of P South. Again, we pivoted and put together a development team to achieve affordable housing units for the whole parcel and provided a new proposal. We were then asked to fully maximize the number of affordable units. Again, we pivoted and modified our development partnership and came up with a proposal to accommodate the maximum number of affordable units. Through all of this, we have remained true to the vision of affordable housing paired with safe and inclusive community space for all, a cafe that benefits the community beyond just its menu, and access to human service provider representatives. Peace South is truly an ideal location for this project. And honestly, in the future, it's not going to get any easier to develop affordable housing. So now is the right time, in the right place, to move forward with this project. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, I have Reverend Joe Kim.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Joe, and I get to serve as lead pastor of Bothell United Methodist Church, the spiritual home of over 500 members, many of whom live and play and work in our greater Bothell community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you in support of the letter of intent and the Bothell Urban Project. In the past, I have had the pleasure of addressing you, City Council, directly as we dream together of what a meaningful space could mean for our community at Peace South. Tonight, I wonder if I might speak to the community as a whole, recognizing that each of us here claim Bothell as our community in some way, and I trust that we all have Bothell's best interest at heart. I must name and confess that I come into this space and in this moment with heaviness in my heart. I believe that our country has moved beyond the civil discourse and disagreements that make us better into a mentality of scarcity and distrust. And I imagine this to be true of us tonight as well, as you, Council, prepare to vote on what might seem to be a contentious issue. But I would often suggest that all of us, that scarcity is a mindset that we ourselves have cultivated. We are the ones that create distrust because we are so limiting in our understanding of the resources and well-being of our community. We believe that if one group benefits, the others do not. We believe that if one group moves forward, others take steps back. And therefore, if one group offers an idea that could be and will be for the better of our collective community, it is met with distrust because we can't believe that there's not some hidden agenda. I simply refuse to believe that to be the case. I'd like to offer and remind the community that through this partnership between the City of Bothell, Bridge Housing, and the church that I'm privileged to serve, we can honor and reflect the collective benefits for you and for me and for our community, and especially those impacted by rising rates and costs of living. And this yearning for the collective benefit has been and will continue to be our church's posture as we live into the belovedness of all. Let me be clear, Bothell United Methodist Church and Northwest Community Solutions have nothing to gain from this partnership. Throughout our church's history, we have listened to the needs of the community because we are part of the community, and we have worked to develop the partnership and collaboration opportunities to address those needs. Tonight, I ask of two things, both related to trust. First, I ask the council to trust us as a partner, knowing that we have nothing to gain, knowing that we are investing into the future of Bothell. I ask that you vote to sign the letter of intent that will push this project forward for the needs of our community today and the years to come. Second, I ask the community to trust us as a partner, knowing that we have nothing to gain, knowing that we are investing into the future of Bothell. And if you'd like to have further discussion, I and Pastor Kristen are available to share in this vision for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Tara Droney. Tara? They are not here, so that is all I have signed up to speak. However, I do have Mr. Swanson in the audience. He's got his hand raised, so I believe he would like to speak. And if anybody else in the virtual audience wishes to speak, please raise your hand and we'll panel you in afterwards. And then after we're done with that, I'll call on the audience members if they wish to speak. Mr. Swanson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Laura. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Lot P is part of a $20 million purchase of the current residents of Bothell to buy land from Northwell School District. A couple of weeks ago, Kyle Stannert, the city manager, was asked to find out what the balance of the $20 million is if you consider the incoming revenue of the sales of the surplus land. Now, I haven't seen that figure. I'm sure Kyle has provided it to you. But to my memory, and back the envelope counting, we're $8 million down from that $20 million. We received $12 million back out of the $20 million that's lost. Now we're proposing to give $10 million piece of property to the Bothell Methodist Church, whose pastor, Kristen Joyner, is a BOPOT member, as are 5 of you. Karsten Kurd, Mason Thompson, Ramiel Cabra, Jenny Alderks, and one of the founding members of BOPOT, Ms. Amanda Dodd. If we don't take advantage of Lot P and turn it into a city park, we're going to increase the heat island effect in one of the worst places of Bothell. Can't we do anything else other than to turn from Safeway down to the river into a flat jack hot griddle, pouring warm water across pavement and tire dust, which I've talked about many times before? We can turn this into a park, a fountain park, fed by natural pressure from Horse Creek that will cool the entire city during the hottest parts of the month, hottest parts of the summer. We can also do the same thing for the river and our salmon streams, which will also save our bull trout and our rainbow trout, because they both die. Well, I can see this going forward, but I want to ask all the former and current BOPOT members of City Council and the Planning Commission to recuse themselves because of a conflict of interest that can't be proven. But I'm talking about an apparent conflict of interest as defined by the RCW laws. I'm out.
Thank you. That is all I have signed up to speak. However, is there anybody else in the virtual audience wishes to speak? Please use the raise hand function. And if anybody in the audience wishes to speak, please step to the podium, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Juliana Pooley, Kenmore. Good evening, Bothell City Council. I'm here to voice my support for the Bothell Urban Project. I'm a member of NUSA, and I have a master's degree in community and economic development with an emphasis in housing and homelessness. I'm thrilled with the Bothell Urban Project's plan for affordable housing, especially because it will be centrally located in downtown Bothell. Our region has a critical need for affordable housing, and it is always best practice to develop housing with an investment from a local community partner, like our good Methodist neighbors here, and to also build housing near other community amenities and not build something on the outskirts. Exactly like tonight's proposal. The Bothell Urban Plan is evidence-based, well-designed, and something I know can change and save lives. 20 years ago, when I was a local high school student cheering at Pop Keeney, studying at the old Bothell Library, and volunteering at the old Hope Link, I never imagined that Bothell could transform into such a beautiful, accessible, and people-oriented city. And now that I have young children who take dance classes, swim lessons, and attend school here in Bothell, I'm even more invested in its future. You've done a beautiful job giving Bothell the glow up it deserves, and I hope this important progress continues with a vote yes for the Bothell Urban Project. Thank you.
I'm Jenny Bailey, and I am also a member of Bothell United Methodist Church, and I'm here to express my support for the letter of interest. We have a housing crisis in our area, and I know because I have a 25-year-old son who is graduated from college, has a full-time job, and he can't afford to move out on his own. It's affecting everyone in some way in our community, and the Bothell Urban Project has been really well thought out over a period of years, really paying attention to the needs of the community and to the requests of this city's council. And so it's time to move it forward. Let's get this project funded. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn Tangen. My husband and I have been we've been residents of the city of Bothell for over 60 years and raised a family. And we're the people on the sign where it says in Bothell for a day or a lifetime. Well, that would be us. But I would like to say that we are very supportive of this project. We think it's the right thing, the right time for the betterment of our city. So I urge you tonight to please consider and vote for this project. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. I have one more person in the, oh, sorry, I just promoted, okay, go ahead. Ma'am, go ahead, and then I'm going to promote somebody from the virtual audience who wishes to speak.
Well, I'll keep it very brief because everyone already said the same things that I was thinking. I also have a grown daughter in her early 30s, and her generation would love this kind of project to happen. And the thought that service providers would have a place here instead of having to deal with traffic for their clients would be wonderful. So my husband and I lived in Bothell for about 20 years, 23 years, and we're completely in support of this.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? Go ahead and state your name. The person in virtually decided not to speak, so.
Hello, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I'm Kristen Joyner, pastor of community engagement at Bothell United Methodist Church and one of the leaders of the Bothell Urban Project. I'm here to express my encouragement and support for your yes votes on moving forward with the LOI. We've been having this discussion publicly for several years, hearing from you all as representatives of the wider community for guidance as well. This project of about 200 rental units for people making around 50 to 60% of the area median income, that also includes a community gathering space, cafe, and a few offices that will be leased to human services agencies, is a vision that we brought to you. It was brought to you by us, a community of several hundred people who are deeply connected in this community. But we've also been responsive to your requests to use this lot, which was always expected to be a development, to maximize the space for housing, and importantly, to pay attention to quality of life issues to our new neighbors who will live there and to the neighbors who already live here. The community space is such an important aspect of this project, as it will bring an indoor space to gather for the population of the densely populated downtown, at the same time not excluding anyone else. This is how we build community. It works well alongside your other visions of a new and improved Bothell Landing and lots E, F, and G, and your vision in support of the rapid transit lines adjacent to the property. This location near the library, city hall, Pop Keeney, and grocery stores makes quality of life a key component. Making housing affordable for people who work and yet make lower wages really does take all of us working together to create this kind of welcoming community that we all say we want. We will continue to be a responsive partner, listening to the needs of the community and responding to the best of our abilities, because we are also a neighbor that has been here a long time. Since the last time we spoke, we have responded with a very updated website at bothelumc.org. Under ministries, you can see the frequently asked questions that should answer a lot of questions for the community. This project isn't the whole answer, but it's a part of it. It takes hard decisions and hard work and contributions of land, time, and money. We're not asking you to do anything we haven't done. We have also been a party to that. Bothell UMC has done those things. You can make this happen by voting yes tonight. Thank you for your days and your lifetimes for service to Bothell.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council. My name is John Culver. I'm a resident and City Council member over in Kenmore, speaking only for myself tonight. And I'm speaking in favor of the Affordable Housing Resolution, the LOI with United Methodist Church. I have a lot of confidence in this council. I think y'all know what you're doing and what you came here to do. We all understand fully we're in the throes of a regional affordable housing crisis. We all have to do our part, and this is a great next step to make tangible headway on those goals. I salute you and I commend you all. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Kay, can you hear me? Kay, if you'd like to speak, you're muted, and I'll need you to state your last name as well. Okay, one last time, if you can unmute your mic, you'll have 3 minutes. There you go.
Right here?
Yep, there you go. Can you state your last
I
name
just
for
felt-
me, please?
Oh, Hopkins. I just felt the need to jump in here because I have a few questions and I'd like them to be answered. What is the definition of affordable housing? I mean, that obviously means different things to different people. Who are the people who are moving in? And I keep hearing, how does it, or I keep hearing it benefits Bothell. I don't know how, I've never heard that. So how will the police, fire, and other public services be affected by this, by people moving in? Is this transitional housing? And can't read my own writing here, but I've driven around. Obviously, I've lived here for 25 years. So I wonder, as I drive around, I see housing apartments that look like they are low income. I don't know that for a fact, but should I do my own research? Or can somebody from council provide that to the citizens? I also say, the only people who are talking here are the Bothell United Methodist Church. And that makes me wonder if the actual citizens of Bothell are being informed of what's going on. I don't understand. Like if the Catholic Church came in and said, oh yeah, we want this property for free, would they get it? So there's something else going on and I don't know what it is, and it's bothersome. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all I have signed up to speak. Thank you, Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. Next up is the city manager report. And kick it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. One quick update tonight, but before I do, I'll just mention too that for the last speaker, I don't know how to get a hold of, but I'm happy to follow up with answering any questions. My email address is kyle.stannert@bothell.gov. If she wants to reach out, I'd be happy to schedule some time to talk through affordable housing. For tonight, really not much of an update. What I did want to just remind everyone, I think the council knows, but for the community, we did cancel our earlier meeting on the first week of July and have a meeting scheduled on July 30th. So that'll be the 5th Tuesday of the month, which doesn't come around all the time. And so just as a reminder, we'll be back together in 2 weeks. Thank you for that. We have a pretty full agenda tonight, and we're doing our best to keep the July 30th meeting a little under 3 hours so we can take the recess into August. But other than that, for the sake of time, I'm going to end my report there and happy to answer any questions during the meeting.
Thank you, city manager. Next up is council committee reports, community reports, and conversations. Council members? Going once, going twice? All right, in that case, I would love to have a motion to approve the consent agenda or the balance of the consent agenda.
Sorry, we have a projected agenda discussion.
I always forget that one. All right, projected agenda discussion. There's fireworks sales within Bothell city limits, and city manager is going to kick us off and explain.
Thank you, Mayor. And just briefly tonight, we're following up on a request that came up on the March 5th City Council meeting, of which there was an inquiry around potential changes to the Bothell Municipal Code regarding fireworks sales, and specifically to amend the code to allow for a broader use of sales. There is a memo in your packet tonight with some of the answers to questions that came up from council, but most notably, I will note that when our deputy fire chief, Butch Noble, who's also the fire marshal for the city, was doing research, he became aware that the Snohomish County Council was in the process of considering a ban of fireworks sales in unincorporated Snohomish County, including the urban growth area that is surrounding Bothell. With that, we began monitoring and reaching out. The county council had a public hearing back in August, and then we're considering a potential ban, I believe, in June of this year. As council may be aware, if there's any changes to provisions related to fireworks sales, there's a time that needs to go into allowance of basically giving a 1-year period before that change takes place, so that if anybody is planning on sales, their business isn't affected. That change did take place, and so wanted to bring this back to council with that change. We felt it was pretty significant, and also wanted to get on the other side of the 4th of July to be able to report back of complaints, which, as noted in the memo, did go down from 76 last year to 33. Again, that doesn't mean that there was no fireworks. I think we did get some good picture of the concentration of where they were happening, and it gives us some outreach opportunities for next year. But the call volume has gone down at least. So with that, we wanted to bring back this for council. Councilmember Menke had requested this. We've communicated to him, and the suggestion tonight is to not make any further revisions to what is allowed in Bothell, since the only area around us that was providing sales now is going to have a change next year. Not only is our code only a few years old, I think it also makes sense to see if there's any change from the county ban, and then go from there if there's going to be any interest in changes. So that's our recommendation tonight, but I wanted to turn it over to council to see if you want us to proceed with further investigation and changing the code, or if you agree with the recommendation to let this one go for now.
Councilmember Menke?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to staff for chasing this one down in my requests. Thank you to the fire marshal as well for digging into Snohomish County and sharing that information with us. I think the one thing that wasn't shared was the Tukwila information that was provided to us regarding potential improvements in their city was found to be not accurate. So that's also a good indicator that we should remain status quo, and I'm happy to support remaining status quo at this time.
I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now I would love to accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I've got one more.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because there's a, yes, future item. Councilmember Menke.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to bring an idea to council for consideration. I'm sure most people know that there is a potential merger going on between Albertsons and Kroger. There have been some lawsuits filed regarding this merger, but I believe it could be beneficial to us to create a resolution from the city regarding the merger. And the reasons why I think this is important are as follows. So what we've got right now are Albertsons and Kroger merging. They are main competitors of each other. They do have 5 out of the 6 grocery stores in town. They've recently let everybody know that 3 of those 6 will be offloaded in a sale to a wholesaler who is not a retail grocery store owner. The last time this happened was when Safeway and Albertsons merged. The sales of those stores were to a local retailer named Hagen. Hagen lasted a little less than a year before they declared bankruptcy and sold all of the stores back to Albertsons, which negated that entire sale. So I think as it pertains to the city, we have a risk here of a loss of jobs in the city. We have a risk of loss of choice, loss of competition, which increases the cost of prices. Even a VP at Albertsons actually came forward and said that they're virtually creating a monopoly. So it's kind of interesting that internally they've said the same thing. So I would like the city to consider and council to consider a potential resolution opposing this merger. I think it does not say good things for our city based on the last one. And I have concerns that costs are going to rise for the residents of our city. And just for information, the 3 grocery stores that will be sold are both QFCs, the downtown and Canyon Park QFC, and then the Safeway Thrasher's Corner, which is just outside the city.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing this up because I think it is a big deal. I do want to check in on where it's at I know that, and this is why I'm asking, because I've heard this and that, and I will admit, perhaps I'm tracking a lot of things, so that update is not top of mind for me. Do we know, has it passed federal regulatory oversight at this point?
It is still being reviewed. The two companies are continuing their merger plans at this time. There was a lawsuit against the state of Washington, who filed a lawsuit to stop the merger, and the lawsuit against the state was dismissed, and so our state is still pursuing a block of this. I think there's a few other states that are impacted by this. We are somewhat unique in that QFC rolled up Olson's, which we used to have in town, which was then bought by Fred Meyer, which was then bought by Kroger on the other side. Albertsons bought up Safeway and then rolled off things to Hagen and then bought up Hagen. So we're seeing a lot of consolidation, and I understand why these large companies are trying to consolidate. They're seeing increased competition from the likes of Walmart, who has negotiating power. Amazon's coming in and trying grocery. It's been trying grocery for 20 years and hasn't figured it out yet. But competition is good for consumers. Competition keeps prices lower. It's good for jobs because it doesn't close down more stores. We do have a limited number of stores in town, and I want to make sure that we do have choice, we do have competition, and prices don't escalate where they're already been escalating. We don't see an increase just because companies are merging together and we don't have the choice.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the Olson's reference. I feel like we can go to Mitzel's and then go shopping afterward. Vintage Snohomi talk. But I would support this. I am also curious, being the second newest member, if we've done this before as a city council, and just make sure that we're not going way out on a limb. But I mean, I think it's a big deal, especially depending on where you live in the city. I think your access to grocery stores is going to be severely limited. So yeah, I'm for it, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
Councilmember Alders.
I share some of the same concerns that have been expressed. But I think when it comes to resolutions, we have to be really clear on like who we're addressing, like who's the audience. And so, you know, I'm not clear based on what you're proposing if we're like writing a resolution to Albertsons, you know, like to the companies, or are we writing to the federal oversight? Are we writing to the state? Like, who's our audience and who would this be going to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I see it as us creating a resolution opposing it on behalf of our residents and then sending that resolution to the state attorney general in support of his case against this merger, to the FTC in support of their investigation, and also to the companies themselves, letting them know that our community has grave concerns and there is a past history of mergers that did not turn out well. And this one looks very similar in that a non-retailer with a non-track record who's used to selling to these retailers or a wholesaler is going to take over a large number of stores in the 450 number, which is pretty large. Hagen only took on, I believe it was like 150 stores, and they crumbled in less than a year. CNS Wholesale Groceries, they do own Piggly Wiggly as a brand, but they don't run and operate those. They are franchisors of that brand, so they are not a retailer. And if they don't have that experience, I worry even more. If Hagen had the experience and they couldn't make it, I don't know what CNS is going to do. So that's my thoughts were to send it to the state, send it to the FTC, and send it to the companies themselves.
Yeah, thanks for thinking that through. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd support this. I've heard from a number of community members, they're kind of cautious and trepidation about the merger. I'm wondering, practically speaking, what are we doing as a council? Right now, during the comp plan, some of the feedback that I've received is, people don't want, the Spirit Halloween stores to come in if this is really valuable real estate, and they serve as anchors for the community and for transit, and so there's this fear that more temporary uses will take on in these anchors, and so I'm wondering if maybe so far what I've done is sort of direct people to our comp plan engagement
to encourage them to air their concerns there. But I'm wondering if maybe a resolution would be helpful for our federal lobbying work, and also for our own commitment to our constituents about what we're doing with our land use here.
Councilmember Zorns?
Everyone's making excellent points here, and I think it also speaks volumes to our community. In a community that's really wanting another grocery store in town here, we can't afford to lose. We can't afford to take steps back. So yes, I would support that, and having that on file and having it where we can send it to different parties that it would have impact. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody. I want to take it from another angle. I agree. We should do something. A lot of workers in those grocery stores are union workers also. And we talk about affordable housing, and we talk about, other things we're trying to do in the comp plans. I feel like if the jobs lost, which is inevitable. I mean, they say they're going to, I've been part of M&A, mergers and acquisitions before, where a lot of promises are made, and then a couple of years later, the companies, they just go under, and then people get laid off anyway. So that's what we have a lot of large contingents of union workers here, and I feel like we need to show them some love also as part of this. We're not going to make it then, and we probably will submit it. I don't think it's just a show of goodwill to our residents and workers who work in the city and contribute to our community as well. I feel like it'll be a good thing to do.
I would agree that from what I know of this merger seems to be a unequivocally bad thing for consumers overall. So I appreciate you bringing this up. And I guess my big question was, who are we writing to and what are we asking them to do? Because usually a resolution has, some sort of action. So I guess, would we be asking the state to continue to do what they're doing? Would that be the kind of request, or is it just a general, we don't like this, to send out?
That's a good question. This is my first time proposing a resolution of any sort, so I would take advice from the city attorney on what she thinks the best course of action is, if she has a thought on that. I know this is kind of off the cuff, but.
That's all right. Off the cuff is just fine. For the record, Eileen Kiefer, your city attorney. I've been taking notes as I'm listening to the conversation, but I think given the posture of this, we could have different clauses. One would be directed to the AG in support of their litigation efforts. One might be directed to the FTC opposing any regulatory approval of the merger. Those are the two off the top of my head. One of the things too I can look at is to see whether other jurisdictions are similarly taking action, and maybe they've thought of something I haven't. And if I do find something good, I'll certainly include it. But I am working on a draft based on the consensus I've heard tonight. So we'll return back.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
One suggestion, and I'm surprised to hear our city attorney saying, "Oh, I'm out of ideas," because one thing is, as I mentioned, we have. I know UFCW 3000 has a large cohort of union workers in this. Maybe unions are doing something about this as well. Maybe as far as a whereas clause, maybe not a resolved clause, will it's like whereas, for example, UFCW 3000 is doing ABC, then we are in the resolution, we stand with them or we support them type thing also. Just an idea also. I just have one, you have two. So.
I love the idea about a clause supporting labor in there, and I really appreciate that, Deputy Mayor. And don't forget about choice of residents as well, and options for residents. And this happens, and I can just hear inflation coming on. So, thank you.
And thank you, Mayor. And just to close, Councilmember Dodd had something, but
Councilmember Dodd?
I've heard
Yeah,
for support from everybody, so we will schedule this to come back to
Awesome.
council.
Thank you.
I was just going to point out that there's a bit of a Rite Aid Bartels similarity thing happening. So if we need to predict insights, we have a great use case happening in the city right now. And by great, I mean terrible. So just wanted to point that out.
Now I'm even more annoyed. I miss my Bartels. Thank you. You good?
You want a motion?
No, we don't need a motion.
For the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, yes. But just the balance of the consent agenda because one item was pulled.
I move to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Mankey to approve the balance of the consent agenda, every item in the consent agenda except Agenda Bill 24115. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Fantastic. All right, first agenda is going to be on me because I pulled this agenda bill. Perfect. I don't need to kick it over to you. I wanted to bring this up because it was, I think, 2.5 years ago or so, a couple compositions of council ago allocated some money for bollards downtown. And we gave the policy instruction that we wanted bollards. And it happened, I believe on the last day of budget adoption, something like that, when we were talking about some different things. And council's really never had a chance to speak into this policy as it's been going on. And I would love just to have the opportunity to talk through kind of what policy considerations we want when we're talking about placing these bollards and where to go. And we haven't had a chance to do that yet. So I thought I would pull this from the consent agenda so council could have a conversation with staff.
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight, then, we are going to have a brief presentation on Agenda Bill 24115. Again, as noted in your packet, the policy question tonight is to adopt a resolution authorizing signature of Amendment 2 to the Professional Services Agreement. This would increase the amount of the contract by $40,438 to bring the contract up to just under $115,000. Nancy Bateman, our project manager for this effort, is out of town, so we are going to be joined by our Deputy Public Works Director, Steve Morikawa, to walk council through a little bit of detail about the contract and the scope of what's to come. With that, I'll turn things over to Steve.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. So a very short presentation before responding to any questions or suggestions. I thought it might be good to provide a little bit of the staff's thought process on this project as we work through it. When we first started this project, like the mayor said a while ago, the intent was to look at how best to provide street closure on Festival Street, which is on 101st Avenue between 185th and 183rd, and Main Street from 101 to 102nd. These blocks have been most consistently used for events, and the blocks don't have private driveways that are not under the city control. We did add consideration of 101st Avenue between 183rd and Main Street at council's request, so we did look at that as part of our conceptual overall look. We're currently recommending to move forward and complete the design of the bollards just on Festival Street and Main Street for a few reasons. They appear to be a good solution to the infrastructure needs of closing the streets. There's sufficient ARPA funds to get it done. And right now, we're not recommending moving forward with 101st Avenue between 183rd and Main Street, primarily because it has that private driveway whose legal access to their parking lot is in that block. However, we are taking this opportunity using street funds to repair the west sidewalk, which has a lot of root damage. So that's the work that would occur on that block. This does not preclude consideration of the ability to close other blocks in the future. I think it would be a good idea before we go all in on this bollard concept with the solution to see how well it works on these couple of blocks even if it works well, there could be tweaks that we have to do to make it adjust, to make it more sustainable in the sense of if there's damage done, ease of use, and whether it's well received and works well with events. We have talked to a lot of agencies, and it really seems like the solutions that have been applied, and some of the agencies have put them on multiple blocks, that it's really what worked best for them. So it's really tailored to each agency. We didn't see like a consistency throughout. Everybody used the same kind of thing. So again, this design package amendment basically allows us to finish design and get the construction package ready. And again, with that, we can answer any questions you have.
Steve, did you want to bring up the map too, in case that helps?
My bad, sorry. So let me go through this quickly. This is the same map that's inside your packet. I always have a hard time finding it. So north is up, 185th is this road right here. This is City Hall block. This is the police station. So this is Festival Street, and we have one driveway there, but it's under our control. The next block down on 101st is between 183rd and Main Street, and there is actually a driveway here that's the only legal access for that particular business, unfortunately. We do have events there, but again, not sure if they're being talked to, if each individual event is a request to close their driveway, so to speak. Main Street you're familiar with is already closed between 101st and 102nd here. These, again, Festival Street and Main Street are kind of the low-hanging fruit. I think they would be the best cases because everything's under our control right now. They don't really have driveways that are private at this point. All the other blocks that we would go forward, we'd have to figure something out and do a little bit more gathering things together to make sure it would work well.
Councilmember Zorns.
This is an exciting topic, and it's good to have. Thank you for pulling this. I get the impression that we haven't decided exactly what style bollard that we're going to go with as far as allowing emergency vehicles to go through, but we have a general idea of dimensions and.
We have a pretty tight parameter. We're trying to keep it under a certain weight limit. Typically, that means a certain diameter. Pipe that are 4 inches in diameter can come with different wall thicknesses. If you get too thick, it gets very heavy. Same thing with the larger one. We're trying to get something that's not proprietary. We've been stuck in that situation before. We're trying to get something that is also not difficult to maintain. I mean, we could make it look extremely unique, but if it's the only one of its kind and we have to go back to the same source or it gets damaged or graffiti gets on it, these are some of the things about sustainability and efficiency and cost that we're trying to go. So we're trying to make it look really good and fit, but also balance that with making sure it works well, it's efficient, and if we have to replace these things, it's not going to cost us an arm and a leg every single time.
Right, and the fewer moving pieces, the better, probably.
Yes, which is why we kind of canceled out electric bollards, air pressure bollards, hydraulic bollards, and that sort of thing. We've talked to agencies, and there's been enough issues with them that I think if it's a important enough purpose and you have to have something like that, certainly, but they do acknowledge it gets very pricey even if it just gets banged a little and it can't retract just because the tolerances aren't there.
As an aside, for 101st between Main and 183rd, I was on that sidewalk again today, and every time I go by there, my heart just aches for those poor little trees, thinking future is probably not really good for them. But I'm grateful that we haven't had any serious falls along that sidewalk. So thank you, but I'll just wait till the deed is done. You don't need to tell me about it.
Thanks, Steve. I've got a couple quick questions for you. The street, this block, we already closed this for like the Brewfest, right? The block party and Brewfest. Like this is already something that we do events on, correct?
This one right here?
Yeah, the one. Well, the middle block.
The middle block?
In between Main and 183rd.
Yes, I think once in a while we do. Not
Okay.
every single one, but yes.
And the access point, or is it not accessible from Main Street and 183rd?
That's going through somebody else's property, actually.
Is it the Sherwin-Williams there that it's the only access point?
Yes. So again, legally, that's their access point.
Okay.
If we as a city cut off their access point and don't have permission, we would have to get another property if they need that
Yeah.
parking lot. So it gets a little complicated. And when we start putting in bollards, I think we have to be thoughtful, because I think when we're putting in bollards, one of the things we want to show is it's easier and we're going to have more and more events. So I think, again, recommendations to be thoughtful, because not only this block, but I think any other block currently that we would want to apply this to, same type of issue.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, if we already closed this off, and I mean, I was at the event, the Makers Market the other day, and I know it's worse because we're working on 190th right now, but like just people walking in between those two areas, like there was just a lot of people-car interactions, and it wasn't great to drive through or to walk through, I don't think. And having the ability to close that off when we have those events that happen on both sides of those, I think would be really important. And just because we have the ability to close it with bollards doesn't mean we have to close it, everything. Like if we need the property owner's permission and we don't have it, like it seems like having that option, if we've got two places we're looking to do this and there's just one block in the middle, like having the option to have that block in the middle seems like it would be super valuable to me. I was wondering, I saw in the packet, in the contract, that we're looking, essentially asking them for 3 different options of, or they're going to give us 3 different options in terms of how to do this? No? Did I misread that?
Yeah, that was a conceptual phase that we're beyond. The 3
Okay.
options are specifically the type of bollards.
Okay. Could we ask them, and this might be a different scope of a contract, but what it would look like to be able to do this, and could you bring that back to council and we could have a discussion about 2 different options?
We could, certainly. It would be a change in scope. It is something we already looked at conceptually, closing it off. It does create some other issues. As an example, if you think about at the north end of that one block, that's where 183rd and 101st is an intersection. You still would have to get people across that intersection as well. So we even thought about blocking off that intersection. But once you start blocking off that intersection, then you have the cross streets. You have the same thing about turning people around and making them drive into private driveways in order to turn around. So it starts becoming a logistical issue of how are you going to get people to turn around legally? So that was one difficulty, and I think the other one was the Main Street 101st intersection as well, because typically we'd want that to be able to go at least, if you're going northbound on 101st, take a left turn on Main Street. How do you get people around that corner? I mean, again, it's the extent of protection for the event. How far do you go? And you can take it to the nth degree. And I think what we're saying at this point is there are agencies who have done it throughout the United States and done it differently. And it really is how well it works for your department and the people setting it up and taking it down, what your geography looks like, what your events look like. We think it's reasonable to try to start at these 2 blocks, get familiar with it a little bit, see how it works. There's nothing to say that we can't expand it, certainly in this first block as well. We also think that, one of the visions, as an example, in the old downtown plan was Main Street eventually wouldn't have any driveways. That kind of discussion as an overall downtown, where you want your access to cars for blocks and things, could be part of your discussion. Then it makes it a little easier and less impactful on businesses as they start changing to create your, pedestrian environment. So again, we certainly can do that. We would probably delay the project a little bit. We would come back and share a little bit with what the difference is and what some of our concerns are and why we felt at this point that particular block was probably not the best time right now. Maybe take our first step and then prepare us for that next.
And Mayor, if I may interject too, just wanted to point out a couple of things. As Steve noted, again, with the intent of the scope of this is to do the two sections. To your question, as council considers options, just for clarity of a motion, would want to put out there for consideration too there's a couple options that I see in terms of where to go. So one is to approve this contract. And then again, if there's more information that council wants later, you could separate those two actions. Conversely, if your concern is you don't want to approve a contract without further consideration of scaling up and doing additional sections, then it would be a reject the contract and direct staff to come back with more options. So those are both choices the council could make. Well, I do want to point to in the agenda bill on page 27, we are anticipating that the design will be complete in the fall and early winter of 2024, with construction starting in early 2025. Part of our timing is as we look at choices in terms of what to be built. We're looking at the timing, knowing that there's been a lot of feedback around trying to make, especially on Main Street, look more visually appealing. But in addition to that is that we've allocated $1 million for this project. And so scaling up the design, certainly the cost of that contract will fit within the $1 million. Construction may go over, so that would be just another consideration to know as it comes forward. So in summary, I think there's a couple of options here. One is to separate two actions in terms of maybe approving this and then saying you want more information, or rejecting the whole thing and saying coming back. I'll also note that our intention has been, following the comp plan, we have committed to one of the first action steps is to revisiting the downtown sub-area plan to include higher policy discussions for council of what the flow of downtown is in the future. And if you look at the current plan, there are conversations about pedestrian access and different things. So trying to fine tune that because it's been a while. So that all being said, I think those are a couple things that I'd want to focus council in on in terms of the direction for tonight really regarding this contract amendment.
Thank you. Just a real quick, Steve, I appreciate that. I had a couple points to make. I appreciate that you guys have looked at this and looked at that mid-block as well, but we haven't had a chance to have that discussion in front of our community at all, or give any input, and I would really like to at least have that conversation. And from my point of view, we allocated money for this. It was 2 council compositions in like 2.5 years ago, and we're getting to the point now, 2.5 years later, where maybe in 6 months we're going to start working on it, and it just seems like a really long way away to start that process over again. I'm also concerned that if we do it in 2 different phases, that we aren't going to be doing it as efficiently as we could in terms of where those bollards are being placed, and these are really expensive. And I just want to make sure we're taking as holistic of a look at this as we can. Could we use the next 2 weeks before we come back on the 30th to talk to the consultant and ask what looking at the mid-block option would do to timeline and cost, and then have the conversation on what direction we wanted to go on the 30th?
Sure, we can do that.
If that's the will of the council, there's no guarantee that they'll say yes. So
of course,
the risk there is that no. So we would need, I think at some point, we're going to need a motion from council of what action you want to see. If council wanted to direct delaying this to July 30th, we would need that to be something that was moved, seconded, and voted on.
And this is something that you'd mentioned we were hoping to get started on in the fall, correct?
Yeah, the current timeline is that this would be put us on the path for design in the fall. 2 weeks in that case, if they're able to turn it around in 2 weeks, may not be significant.
Okay.
If they're not able to, if this is a change where they have to do quite a bit of consideration of what is possible, it could slip months. So we just don't know.
But at the very least, if for whatever reason the consultant wasn't able to get us those answers in 2 weeks, we could bring this back and then approve this in 2 weeks and be on schedule.
Just I would ask, be very clear with the direction, and we'll see what the vote is. So
yeah. Obviously, if that's the will of the council, but I'm just asking more for a, like, if we put this off for 2 weeks, we aren't losing any time overall.
Right. Let me be clearer. If the direction to staff is to come back no matter what on July 30th with an answer and a contract amendment for consideration, that's different than saying come back when you have a contract amendment.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So the timing is really incumbent upon what we're directed to do tonight.
Okay, perfect. So I guess what, oh, Steve, sorry.
And if I can help.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ways to go, and I don't think there's a perfect way to go. So we can go, like, I think we're a slightly conservative, cautious approach now, but get something in the ground right now that we can use. The other way we can move forward. There's risk with moving forward as well. You talked about efficiency. The more bollards we put in the ground right now without understanding where they're going to ultimately be, we might not be using some of those. And that was one of the concerns of staff with that block is how do you actually get this intersection to work? How are people going to actually flow through this intersection? Do we want the bollards here? Do we want the bollards here? So it's very difficult, and it's interesting. We had a lot of different ideas, couldn't really agree on one, and that's one of the reasons we're coming back and said, until we kind of get a plan and see how some of these events work, hard to react and predict everything that goes on. And then we would be putting, like right now, we'd be putting 4 rows of bollards, let's say 5 each. You know, if we're going to close this block, we would put 2 more, and we just do our best to put it in the right place. Doesn't mean in the future after we all talk about it, because there's a lot of opportunities in downtown for pedestrian-oriented and how to connect it all up. It could mean that, you know, 1 or 2 of those are kind of obsolete and never get used. And then that's just money we lost that could have gone somewhere else to other bollards. And then the last thing I would say is, like city manager said, is we can do as much as we can up to probably the funding, I think. And that might be something you want to consider as well. Do you want to spend more money, or how close can we get to that allotted budget at this point, at this time?
Yeah, I guess I would just love to know what our options are, and if the consultant can come back with a different scope that looks at both options, so council can have that policy conversation here in the dais. I guess, so my request would be, can we take the next 2 weeks and have that conversation with them and see if we can get direction on that, and then bring it back in 2 weeks regardless, but try to get more information. Is that, what do you guys think? I should stop talking now. Councilmember Zorns.
Regardless, what's in, I don't know, what would you call it, gold or copper in the yellow warm tones, regardless, we want those in place. Yes? So I guess my 2 bits on this is, let's approve this with the request of coming back and putting what would it take to put in the option that you're talking about, but at least we've got the core part moving forward. And, you know, we can approve this tonight, and in 2 weeks, we can find out whether or not the consultants think that we could have a discussion on modifying it.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Steve, thanks for the information. And I just wanted to call out, I appreciate how thoughtful we're being about the bollards, not getting something that would be a big maintenance headache or just otherwise buyer's remorse later on. With the budget that has been allocated for this, is it realistic to look at a broader scope? That's one thing I just want to take a step back and understand.
I'd have to check, but we might be able to get those blocks in if we have just 2 more. If we start getting a little funkier on the intersections, then we might start exceeding.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I realize I'm asking you to just like guess how much it, you know, after you've been working on it, but I do understand the nature of that.
Yeah, and I think at the final end of the exercise, the final design's going to play that out, because we have to build foundations for it. We have to make sure we avoid utilities because we're putting in foundations in the road. And we have to pick the actual bollard. And again, depending on what it winds up being, those cost ranges are quite wide.
Yeah, for sure. And then with the access concerns, obviously the 2 property owners could come to an agreement and record an easement or something. Is there any other way that changes without redevelopment overall? Like, what does that look like in the future if we say we want to get the access off of that road so that we could explore it? What would that look like in theory?
probably have to lean more to community development, but as an example, in a previous downtown plan, future development would not have their access off Main Street. So if there was a plan that selected particular streets, and you have to be very strategic because you still have to provide access to every property. So that's the difficult part. But that's where the time and the effort would have to go in to figure that out. Certainly could put in bollards. I guess we're being cautious on the message that provides if we haven't had the opportunity to think that through and work with the property owner before we put in the bollards.
Totally. The way that would come up could be vastly different if it's like, hey, I can't get to my business today versus like they've talked to us and we've, yeah.
My assumption is each individual event, we probably have been,
Yeah.
I would imagine. But when you put in permanent bollard foundations, even though you can take them out, there is certainly an intent there. And the intent seems to be to ramp up the amount of events we have. And again, those kind of discussions and property issues take a lot more time than working within the street itself.
Totally. I appreciate that. I'm not against exploring a wider scope. I think I also don't want to jeopardize necessarily the timeline here. So I obviously don't have a motion. We have more discussion to take, but I'm really curious what everyone else thinks. So don't be shy.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks, Steve, for bearing with us as we figure this out. My question for you is, you had mentioned that there's a lot to kind of think through to figure out how adding that block how you might plan for adding that block. And I'm wondering, would some more time for public engagement and the ability to get more feedback from the council and the community be able to help staff think through all those parts? Because then you could be hearing from the community as you figure that stuff out.
I believe, yeah, in a sense, I think when city manager was talking about the overall look at downtown, I think that would be part of it. And having an overall plan and intent definitely helps when you start installing very specific infrastructure, I think.
So yeah, that's been the plan going forward. Again, council can choose direction to accelerate it, and we'd come back and talk about how we would do that.
Okay, I think that asking the consultants to come back in 2 weeks with that additional block in mind would be beneficial. And so because I think that it might afford some opportunity for the public to contribute to that conversation, and we would be able to participate in that conversation more when it returns to us. So I don't know how to
too, there was a
message
public
that.
outreach. We could bring information back next time we come to, but there was public outreach last summer at many of our community events about the potential closure and locations and what the community would like to see. So we have had some of that engagement. It's again from last year, but I'll just again.
Yeah, I think digging that back up and putting it in our agenda for our next meeting would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Steve. I had one question about something that you had mentioned. You mentioned that when you do the location and you're putting in the footings, you may run into utilities. What's the likelihood of that happening? And if we do we have to relocate the utilities, or do we relocate the bollards slightly one way or another? I could see that causing problems if they're not spaced appropriately. So I'm curious what our contingency is with that and what the potential cost overrun might be if we do run into that issue.
We're hoping not to. Typically, utilities are 2 feet below, hopefully more. Main Street is really old, but fortunately, we just worked on it not too long ago. I think the challenge is to try to create a foundation that can take a certain amount of overturning when a car hits that bollard. We're not trying to make it necessarily rated to stop something, but we do want to make it stout enough that it is a deterrent. So usually what it is you either go deeper or you go wider. So likely we're going to go wider and shallower so that if something tries to overturn it, it's more difficult. But again, things have to be thought of because like you just said, whatever's in the road on each particular intersection is a little different. Is there a water valve there, right where the foundation needs to be? Is it over some sort of box that's in the road because a fiber optic is there? That's what this design would do. Get very specific on where we have to put everything. Yeah.
Okay, so that would, I mean, I imagine that would cost a lot of money if we did have to relocate something.
And that's why we're at an estimate at this point. Typically, until you kind of complete further design, you're not quite sure how much it's going to cost. We're pretty early on in the project with 30%. This has kind of been an unusual one because the concept itself is very difficult. But the design will tell us about how much it costs. And then, of course, proof of the pudding is getting an actual bid. That's the actual cost. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm not opposed to inquiring to see what we can find out from the consultants in 2-week time frame. I don't have any special insight into what they can tell us in that time frame. I see holding off on this until then as being okay because it doesn't delay any kind of approvals and timelines for getting it done. I think it is important to have it done for next year's events, but I would be okay with delaying for 2 weeks to explore what we could find out in the meantime.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Steve, for the information. I was going through the timeline, and this project, so to speak, was initiated in 2021. You know, the conversation. We approved a budget 22, and then there was an amendment in in 22, and then there was an amendment in 23, July. And then there's this other amendment that we have right now. Why do we keep amending the budget?
I think one of the amendments was to get more public input. It has been a challenge. It is a different kind of project. It's a lot of the infrastructure and the engineering part is not really the issue. It's how to do it such that you can support an event and how can you do it such that you don't affect traffic and private property and everything. So it's really kind of, it's a puzzle. So it's taken a little challenge. It's also been a challenge to work through things like how stout do you make the bollard? Do you have to stop a truck? Do you have to stop a car? Do you have to stop a fast car or slow car? All of these required a lot of effort to talk, not just from the consultant. It's mostly been internal that we've had to work with different departments to make sure everybody has a comfort level with what's going on. Again, when we come back in 2 weeks, if that's the direction, it likely will be staff presenting you with what we know about what some of those options are. The consultant will not have time to come up with different ideas. We've kind of looked at those ideas. And like I said, there wasn't a clear consensus from staff on how to move forward because there was enough unknowns that if we put something somewhere in the future, we might not be using it, we might be putting it somewhere else. So that might be one of the things when we come back to you, we're kind of showing you what we went through and some of the decision points we made.
I appreciate that. One of my worries is that there's a sense of urgency. This has been going on for 3 years, like 3 councils ago. So we want to see some things happen as soon as possible, but we also want to see something happen that we don't have to go and research all over again, you know, that middle part, for example. So we want to see something out that we don't have to redo in a couple of years or whatever the timeline is. And we don't want to see the cost keep escalating because it seems like the cost keeps going up as we move along the timeline. And this is something that's concerning.
That's actually a good point. Because of the type of bollards we picked, the costs have actually come down from when we thought. Because we originally, if you look at the CFP, we allocated $1 million, but we thought it would be a couple $1 million because we were looking at movable, retractable bollards at the time. But these would be fixed bollards that are very simple. You lift up. You will probably have a sleeve in the sidewalk. You store it there. You lock it down. Again, sounds very easy, but Nancy did a wonderful job about talking with many agencies across the United States on very different uses on how they use these things, and it's very varied. But she did get a couple common themes that came out. Keep it simple. it's going to get hit. So make sure you can replace it and not burn money every time you have to put one in there. And I think the third one is there's multiple ways you can do this. So I think, again, from where we're coming from, we think it would be exciting to get 2 blocks in, give it a go, do the best we can with what knowledge we have. But again, to me, the actual proof is using it. How well is it working? Is there anything wrong with the design that we can improve upon? And while we go through that exercise of figuring out how we want our downtown, where we want to close off, then spend the money on those particular areas. That's just the staff's thought. And I'm just trying to portray, not that hopefully we're trying to take longer, it's just, it is a thoughtful thing, and there's a lot we had to work through. And this is our recommendation, and why this is our recommendation.
And I very much appreciate it. I'm not diminishing any of that work. I'm just saying, there's a sense of urgency. It seems like we need to do something. The parties we're going to have downtown are going to increase in numbers, so we need to take care of our people also. So I very much appreciate it. So I talk about cost escalations in terms of consulting also hours, and those aren't cheap, right? So a bollard, it's like material, maybe cost goes down. It's not the major, in my mind, the major line item cost for it. It's like the hours spent in designing, and that could go up. Okay,
and that's what we'll have to find out in 2 weeks.
And so that's what I worry about. I worry about the timeline for this thing. And then you mentioned the property owner. I mean, we had 3 years to talk to them and get ideas and work with them. And we've had examples of the temporary closures we've had before. So if they would have they wanted to complain, they would have complained already.
I'll just note on Steve's behalf that, again, the project manager is out of town, so there's some of this is we don't have complete knowledge of what the feedback has been. So we may have that in 2 weeks as well.
Okay, let's get that. And maybe we can, in the next 2 weeks, we can have a conversation with the property owner and get their feedback as well, so we can have the full picture. Thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks for the presentation, Steve. I agree with the things that other people have said, so I'm going to move that we table the resolution for signing amendment number 2 until July 30th, and direct staff to come back with information about expanded scope.
First, I'm going to just request a slight alteration out of past practice of not tabling, and there's some procedural things, but I think what you're asking is to postpone the decision until July 30th with an additional option of increasing the scope. Is that fair?
That is my
Thank you.
motion.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Curd and a second from Councilmember Dodd. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. I think 2 weeks is not life-changing. I had 2 observations, and I decided to share them. One, I think a lot of us became politically activated and motivated to do this work when the city couldn't do a lot of cool things. And I think there's a bit of a fear of missing out happening, where it's like, if we don't do it right this first time, it's never going to happen again. And I would encourage us all to take the 2 weeks and think through that and see if that fits or not. And let's also, we have perhaps revisiting the downtown plan coming up after we finish the comp plan, which hasn't been a small endeavor. We want our staff to want to come to work and not be in 30 plans at once. But also, I think just let's make sure that we don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I'm 90% sure I got that phrase right. But it's all very exciting. It won't all happen at once either. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And I also appreciate staff being willing to bring this back and have the conversation in a couple of weeks. This is a conversation that I know there's been a lot of desire to be a part of here from the dais. And we don't want to, we want to make sure the work gets done, and we want to make sure we have something cool in place for next year. And I'm excited to move forward, whatever things look like in 2 weeks, and do something cool. So thank you. All right. City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Fantastic. All right, next up is a public hearing for State Bill 6015 Residential Parking Code Amendments. It's our Agenda Bill 24118. I'm going to kick it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And coming to the table tonight is our Deputy Director of Community Development, Christian Getz. As you'll recall, Council took interim action on this item recently, and then part of the legal requirements of interim actions is to then have a public hearing within a certain window, and that is tonight's objective, is to hear any feedback. So with a little refresher and to, with a staff report prior to opening the public hearing, I'm going to turn it over to Christian.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Glad to be back. I've got another item tonight, so this is one of two. Want to refresh your memory on this. I'll be really quick. I know time is, we're a little full tonight. Tonight, your only action is to hold a public hearing. I want to provide a quick refresher, as City Manager mentioned, and then jump into any clarifying questions that you may have. So back on June 4th, we discussed this item as the interim ordinance that was passed and is in effect. It was responding to a state bill that required consideration for parking associated with residential projects. So making it easier, creating more flexibility within city and county standards. And the one item that we have to do at this point is to hold the hearing within 60 days. This was our last shot at it. At this point, we have not made or not found any additional edits that would need to be included. The ordinance that was passed is the ordinance that we anticipate bringing back in the fall. It is the ordinance that will go to Commerce for their review. And once that is all closed up, we figure we'll be back here sometime in early to late September to provide you with the full ordinance to take full effect. Quick refresher, it only affected two sections of Title 12 in the Bothell Municipal Code, and it created the option for parking to be included in garages as opposed to required in garages or other structured parking. It created a definition for tandem parking, and then it established some flexibilities for non-conforming provisions within the code. That is it. That is all I have. If you have any questions that you'd like to have clarified at this point, happy to do so. Very discreet update for you.
I don't see any lights coming on up here, so I'm going to open the public hearing. And City Clerk?
Thank you. We have one person signed up to speak, and that is Mr. Mark Swanson. Mr. Swanson, go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
To find the motivation, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Greetings, all. To find the motivation behind this, all you got to do is read one article. It's an interview by Kerry Westerbeck talking about his 75% haircut in developing his place down there in Bothell downtown. And he complained that the 75% haircut was because of the parking requirements. Well, if you read that article and you see the motivations behind Mr. Westerbeck's opinion, this is all about the cost, reducing the cost of incremental developers. In other words, people like Mr. Westerbeck, who wants to spend the rest of his next active life, it appears, to be developing all throughout Bothell from borderline to borderline, removing our trees, our deer, our salmon. He doesn't mind that we turn 527 or Northeast Bothell Highway or Bothell Highway Northeast. He doesn't mind that we turn that entire road into a great big funnel that's a flapjack griddle pouring hot water in the August coho return salmon season in the Sammamish River. This isn't about anything other than making it more possible for amateur developers like Mr. Westerbeck to make a profit and make other developers, even out-of-town developers, a profit for the next 20 years at the destruction of current residents. Thank you. I'm out.
Thank you. That's all I have. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak? Please step to the podium. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. I'm going to close the public hearing. Unless council had any more questions that came up in the last few minutes, I think we're good to move on. Thank you. All right, next up, we have a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a letter of intent with Bothell United Methodist Church and to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement for the sale of Lot P South. It's Agenda Bill 24119, and I am going to kick it over to the city manager in this seat to present this agenda bill to us.
It's easier to see everyone from here. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening again, Council. As noted, we are back tonight following the study session, which we ended up with pretty clear direction to come back with the LOI, or the letter of intent, for council consideration tonight. Have a brief presentation also to answer a few of the questions that have come up as well, including from council during the study session. So with that, just a reminder, tonight before you is consideration of adoption to authorize signing the letter of intent. What that would do then is the LOI itself would be signed, and as part of the condition of the LOI, there is direction for both parties to begin negotiations in good faith within 90 days. 90 days from today, if you didn't look already, is October 14th. So sometime before October 14th, I'll be back to council with an update. Again, and with the that 90 days to negotiate, both sides will be looking to get to a resolution. There also may be, I'll point out at some point too, that BUMC may look at this and decide that they want to do something else too. So whenever we have an update, we'll come back. We won't wait for the full 90 days, but that is what's before us. Just again to reorient, and we have a bit of an updated map just to show the full context of all of the properties. The Lot P South is represented by a star there. What you'll also see in terms of the color coding is we have some of the purple lots that have been sold. The gold ones are currently under ownership of the city. So that includes Lot P South, the City Hall block lots, as well as Lot E, F, and G. One of the questions that did come up at the study session, and apologies that we're pulling this together, and so not everything made it in the agenda bill, but we will update FAQs. There was a question about what the total investment has been and what have we recouped so far. With our projections, what we were showing is the number that has been cited of the approximately $20 million for acquisition is what the city acquired the school district properties from the North Shore School District. So far, what we have brought in from that, from the disposition of the properties that we no longer own, obviously, is roughly $28 million. Again, a timeline, I won't rehash all of this, but just to, again, walk through the conversations starting from May 2022, although, as we heard in public comment tonight, some of the conversations did start before that. This is where, though, that really the focus became on Lot P South and BUMC as an independent party. This is post-Sound Transit, postponing their parking garages, which is, I think, part of where that conversation had come up. We did receive the no further action status in May of 2023. What I also want to pause on is this July 2023 direction, which came from council. What I do want to just remind everyone of significance is at that time, part of why an LOI gets to some of the questions that I know council members have likely received, and we heard from in written form comment too, of folks looking for a business plan or something more concrete about what is going to happen. What our intent has been, and what the recommendation back in July was, is that the LOI creates a framework that a purchase and sale agreement will be built on. So again, it's while we've been a year since we got that direction. The reality of that is that most of the key elements of a purchase and sale agreement are negotiated as part of the LOI. So it is a different level lift. The change here in where council's request for an LOI came in is that instead of conveying property immediately, which was what had been the response to the city's RFP that was sent directly to the Bothell United Methodist Church, that was the response or intent there. What the LOI does is it sets conditions, but it also, what we're looking at and what the terms of the LOI that's before you, sets out certain conditions that have to be met within a time frame before property is actually signed over. And so at any point, if the other parties decide to walk away, the city still holds the property. If the conditions aren't met within 5 years, as currently written, the city still holds the property. What the LOI does then for the city is it provides protection against the risks of a project of if it doesn't, for some reason, something falls through or doesn't move forward, which we know can happen. What it provides to the other party, though, is that there are a number of steps that need to be taken around funding and garnering support for a project like this to move forward. The LOI, and then leading into the purchase and sale agreement, but the LOI itself shows a commitment of sale, which is a necessary step for seeking funding from a number of the funding sources. So while there isn't a full run sheet of how the project is going to be paid for to move forward for construction at this point, this step provides kind of the go direction for the church and their partnership with Bridge to move forward. So that's why, from a both sides perspective, the LOI was a recommended step. It provides the city some assurance of we didn't go right into a purchase and sale agreement, and we were able to get to a convey of what are the criteria that we'd want to see before we did, and it gives then the clarity for the church in this case to be able to go seek funding. And again, at the study session on June 25th, we received direction to bring back the LOI. One further thing that came up, and it was part of the conversation around what is the investment that has been made and what do we see in downtown. So this is something that I think it doesn't relate directly to the LOI, but as you consider the comp plan later tonight, as well as one of the council priorities is around updating our housing plan and looking at options for different rates of affordability throughout the community, which again is in the comp plan study session, we'll all feel the weight of the requirements of doing that. What I wanted to share with you then is that at the top table on this slide is market rate apartments that have moved forward. I have an asterisk next to Boulevard Place because I do know many people consider that development, which is owned and operated by the nonprofit group SHAG, to be affordable housing. There is affordability clauses that nonprofit who runs Boulevard Place does have in place. They don't share what those numbers are, and it's also something that's not deed restricted. So in the case of the affordable housing project, Sama Senior Apartments, which will be opening sometime in this fall, knock on wood, and then what's before you tonight for consideration, there is a commitment of affordable housing of what levels, how long, duration, all that sort of thing. So I'm putting Boulevard Place into the market rate category. There is some gray area there, but again, for the sake of argument. What I wanted to share with council is that if you total up the number of units then that have been created on the properties that have been disposed of by the city or transferred over as part of this redevelopment effort. Where we're sitting right now, once SAMA opens, and then also when the Alexan, which is on Lot D, opens this fall, both of them are coming online, that would put in this downtown development, the number of affordable units available is about 4% of the total. So that would be it with SAMA, and it is they're at the 50% AMI range or lower. If this project were to move forward, if the council chooses to again enter into negotiations of a purchase and sale, and if the project moved forward at 200 units, that puts us at a 20% of the overall units, and that's notwithstanding if other multifamily projects come online too. But so 20%. Where I wanted to share that with you is just in context of there were some conversations of what has been the investment and what are we seeing. I think just something to be considering, especially as we think about the housing plan moving forward, is what we've seen then is what has delivered us from the market as arguably no affordable housing in those projects. I know we've reviewed the MFTE program recently and talked about the lack of utilization, but so that's just where we are at. The SAMA senior housing is a dedicated affordable housing project. That got us to 4%. This project has the potential that's before you, the potential to get to 20%. And so just for future policy choices, I think that gives us a good kind of a mental image of we can look outside and see the buildings and see the lots that are there, of thinking around what kind of policy target do you want to set going forward. It's probably not 0%, it's probably not 20%, but maybe somewhere in between. And we'll be working together on strategies of how do we attain that. So I hope that's a little helpful. With that, again, the LOI, some of the considerations, and none of this changed at the study session. Really, the clarification is the purchaser in this case would be, the agreement is between the city and Bothell United Methodist Church. BUMC in their own discretion, as they mentioned tonight, there is a RFP that they conducted to find a partner, which is Bridge Housing. The structure is that BUMC is intending to do a ground lease with Bridge to be overseeing the construction and operation of that affordable housing. Again, the intent is 200 units. The purchase and sale agreement will have kind of a waterfall statement of making sure that that's the case. We want reality to match the intent. The project, the price again has been discussed, is currently as written, the city would be conveying the property at no cost, and the timeline that's before us then is that the first step would be there's 90 days to negotiate that purchase and sale agreement. And then after that would be the case, the purchase and sale agreement would be in play for 5 years as conceptually drafted to see if the project could make all the required steps. So with that, again, the consideration tonight before you is whether or not to adopt a resolution which would authorize the city manager to sign a letter of intent. And that letter of intent directs the next step of negotiation of a purchase and sale agreement. Happy to answer any questions.
Not everybody all at once. Councilmember Aldrich.
Thank you, City Manager, for coming back with the additional information we requested, plus a bonus of how many lots were, or how many of those housing units were created on the lots that were sold, and how many of them are affordable. I really do appreciate that analysis. I think we have the opportunity to do something really special here. And like I said, the last time we discussed this, I think that this is the type of public-private partnership that many cities would dream of being able to do, especially with a partner that is literally responsible for founding the city. Like, that is just, it's such a unique experience. And so I'm grateful to Bothell United Methodist for coming forward with this idea and this concept, and for the patience and the dedication and hard work that you have put into preparing for this. And so I'm excited to vote.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. City Manager, just because I don't think I saw it written on the slide, can you confirm that I heard right, that we as a city put about 20 million into buying the lots, and we have made 28 million on selling them thus far. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you're correct. There was no slide for that. The city in 2009, for the 18 acres that were owned by North Shore School District, that's where it's $20.6 million was what the purchase was. Since 2012 was when the first property then was sold. The city has sold 8 major properties for a total of $28,834,989.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
How many cents?
We always round.
Okay.
Price is right.
Good. I mean, if nobody else wants to say anything, I'll accept a motion too.
I
Deputy
moved to consider adoption of a resolution authorizing, sorry.
Go ahead. I can speak to the motion.
Consider adoption of a resolution authorizing. I move to adopt a resolution to authorize city manager to sign a letter of intent and direct negotiation for a purchase and sale agreement for the sale of Lot B South and return to council within 90 days.
Second.
I have a motion from Deputy Mayor Alcabra and a second from Councilmember Dodd. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councilmember Zorns.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this motion. This project, I have no idea the amount of hours officially around a table talking about it and noodling it in your leisure time. And I think our staff has done a stellar job doing what's asked of them from City Council. I'm going to be voting no, and it's for some reasons that trouble me. One, I listened for it tonight. This is a generous give. We have discussions. We've been told that there is interest in buying this property for $10 million. This is a generous give from the city, and I have heard no gratitude, no thank yous. Just a case for, you need to give this to us. And it would have been nice to hear a thank you. But then I look at the Drews who bought their property, and Sama who filled a niche well. They got the property for about, what is it, about 800,000. And I think it was somewhere around 1.2 million was what, but they paid for the property as well. But what concerns me most is that the community hasn't weighed in. They are just now hearing about this. And the community, about 50 plus thousand people in Bothell own that property, and not the 7 people here on the dais. And the community needs to step in and say, yes, we want to do this project and buy in. And you've put up a website, which is great, but as a city, we have not invited the public in to have a conversation with us. Most of the conversations have been behind closed doors, one-on-one. We've had 2 conversations here as a public about it. And I need the people of Bothell to buy in on this, because that's how we're going to have teamwork on this project. If they don't have a chance to buy in on this, they're going to have questions about why there's this huge give. And we're going to say, well, we knew about it. And you should have been aware about it too. So I'm voting no. If the community had the opportunity to weigh in and tell us that they're in on this project, it would be a win-win. But right now, it's not a win-win. So I know it's going to be a symbolic no on my part, but that's where I land.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. I am excited to vote yes on this. We have had a number of public meetings, a lot of public outreach. I'm excited that the city manager committed to seeing what kind of public engagement we can have as far as like a forum on this in the future. We all know I love a forum. And I except for a legal briefing, these conversations have been public. I hope that nobody has been having lots of detailed, private, closed-door conversations, because we should do our business in public. That's why we were elected to do this. So thank you for bringing this to us, and pretty excited about it. Thank you.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. This agenda bill was an interesting one for me. I think it's probably one of the tougher ones, surprisingly, in the last 2 years on council. I kind of went the full spectrum back and forth on how I was thinking about it and the pros and cons, and had some good conversations with a couple folks up here on the dais just about what I was thinking, and got some good additional perspective of things I wasn't thinking about. And I wanted to clarify that, last time we talked about this, I had an interest in discussing purchase price. And I wanted to clarify that really my thoughts behind that were more of expanding what we could do with this. The discussion 2 years ago was around the fact that the church sold their property in anticipation of buying a property from the city. And I was surprised to see it changed on the LOI, but it makes sense why. We've kind of changed the scope of what this was going to be. The church came to us with a vision. We directed them to another property, a part of another property, and then we asked them to take the whole property, and then we asked them to adjust that vision to meet expanded affordable housing and more units. So it makes total sense of why it ended up being a request of a gift of property or a full conveyance at no cost rather than a purchase. But my thought with the sale at a price was taking those funds and using them in a different part of the city for a second project and doing more than just one project. So that's where I was coming from that need or want to discuss. I think there's a lot of good things about this project. I think it maximizes affordable housing on the site. The duration is what we would want. It's a 99-year affordable housing project. It's a partnership with a community group that's very passionate about what they're doing. They've been invested in the community for a long time. They have a track record of getting things done. And they've shown tenacity in responding to all the requests of council over the last few years. They also have a strong partner in Bridge Housing, which is excellent to see. And these are homes for everyday people who just wouldn't be able to be a part of our community if they didn't have this opportunity. So those things are really, what pulled me along, I think, on this and made me really excited about the project. But I also do have some concerns that kind of gave me pause. And as we've gone through this process, some things that have been brought up and things that were in the LOI that came up during the last session. And those things, just for the record, are the 5-year term for shovels to hit the ground with the funding. I do understand funding is very difficult to get. It is a long process. It is a tough process. It is a competitive process. But a 5-year timeline for shovels to hit the ground does concern me a lot. It's going to be an empty, vacant property in current state during this time. There's no guarantee that funding will be obtained. As I said, there are strong partners that are a part of this, but it's very competitive. It's very difficult to get the funding. And if we don't get the funding, if the community group doesn't get the funding, the partners don't get the funding, the project reverts back to the city, the property reverts back to the city. And we've had that happen before. It happened before most of us have been up here on the dais. There was a sale of property with multiple extensions given on shovels hitting the ground that didn't happen, and the city ended up having to buy the property back, which I realize is different than this. The property won't be conveyed up front, but the city did end up with the property back. We're still sitting on the property. Nothing has changed. And we did have a lawsuit that we had to negotiate through and settle. So those things give me great pause. And, I know I'm probably going to be in the minority on this one tonight in not giving my support toward moving forward on it. I do hope the funding partners, if it's moved forward, do get the funding they want. I will, as a council member, if the council goes forward with it, I will get behind the decision, and I will do everything I can to help support it going forward. But my vote up here on the dais tonight is going to be to not move forward and to vote in the negative.
All right. If nobody else is good, I have a couple things. I am super excited about this project because I think this is a wonderful investment in Bothell. You know, over 99 years, 200 units. This will help thousands of people with one of the biggest needs we have in our community. And I'm proud that we get to do this along with a really valued long-term community partner. And it'll make Bothell a more welcoming city, a more vibrant city. I'm really excited to see this project in the ground because I think this is the kind of impact that's worth us investing in, especially when it's with a local partner that has been around since before Bothell was Bothell and has been doing good things in the community ever since. You know, I appreciate the city manager bringing back some of the numbers tonight. You know, when we look at the acquisition and disposition of these properties as a whole, 4% of housing units being deed restricted affordable in this climate, that's not good enough, I don't think. And I love that this takes us to 20%. I think that's a really reasonable overall number. We're already ahead on what we paid in terms of the purchase price, and we still own lots E, F, and G, and I believe a couple different lots on the City Hall property. I also appreciate, Councilmember Mankey, you mentioned expansion and doing more. I think the first time this property was brought to us, it was 16 habitat units, and we're looking at 200 total units. And that delta there will help a ton of people. And to me, that's what this is about. This is about how do we help people in our community and how do we make this a better community to live in. As we have talked and kind of negotiated over the last couple of years, I've been really impressed at how BUMC has changed what they've done in response to our requests over and over and over and over again. Thank you. It probably felt like a wild goose chase at times, and I appreciate your perseverance. For most of the past properties, we've tried to maximize one-time dollars instead of benefit to the community. And I think maximizing benefit to the community on this property helps to bring balance to that. And I'm super excited to vote yes on this tonight. City Clerk? Oh, wait. Yes, we have a motion. We're discussing it. So yes, City Clerk.
Yeah, I'll need a motion, please.
We made a motion.
Sorry,
That was us speaking to the motion.
Sorry, yeah, okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to call roll. Councilmember Zorn.
No.
Mayor Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember Alders.
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd.
Yes.
Councilmember Menke.
No.
Councilmember Dodd.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra.
Yes.
Passes 5-2 with Councilmembers Zorns and Menke dissenting.
Thank you. And thank you, City Manager. All right. Next up, we have a study session. It is 8:02. We are going to take a 15-minute break, and we are going to reconvene at 8:17 for our study session down there. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are down here for a study session, and I am going to kick it over to the city manager to get us started.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have two study sessions before you tonight. The first one, we've been on a journey of the comp plan for quite a long time now, and we're getting closer to the end. So tonight is a pretty significant milestone of setting things up for having a final draft come before you in the fall. To tee this up and frame it a little bit and get us on our way, I'm going to turn things over to our Community Development Director, Jason Greenspan. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, City Manager. We are back here tonight to get feedback from the City Council on the draft comprehensive plan update, specifically on the Planning Commission's findings, conclusions, and recommendations on developing the preferred plan alternative. This planning process, as City Manager mentioned, started a while ago, in fact, a little over 2 years ago with my predecessor. And the last time we were here was in February and March of this year on guiding principles and on the transportation element. And then we were off and running. We completed the draft plan and the draft environmental impact statement, published those on April 17th, and that commenced a comment period on the draft environmental impact statement at the very least for 30 days. We conducted 2 community open houses, one at UW Bothell and one at Crystal Springs Elementary. We workshopped feedback with the Planning Commission over the past 1.5 months and they made findings, conclusions, and recommendations. And you heard those in summary form from the Planning Commission chair last week. So tonight, you're going to hear from our Deputy Director, Christian Getz, and Jesse Hartman, our Senior Consultant from Burke Consulting, primarily on the land use element and on the future land use map, which has the unfortunate acronym of FLUM. You'll hear a lot of details tonight. You'll see a lot of very intricate tables, which we will walk you through and focus you on. You'll hear information about Snohomish County methodologies, King County methodologies and targets. But I just want to emphasize 2 main points. Number one, we really focus on developing one plan for the city. We have a city that's in 2 counties, but we have one plan for the city. We want to focus on how to have sustainable growth that's balanced with resource conservation, encourage multimodal transportation options for all of our households, mitigate impacts from our changing climate, and meet housing and employment needs of our city, our whole city. And tonight, we really need your feedback on the land use element policy and on the Planning Commission's recommendations. It's going to allow us to move forward to develop a preferred land use alternative this fall, which is going to really be the foundation for the remainder of the plan. It's also going to serve as the basis for amendments to our zoning and our zoning code to meet our targets, and allow us to meet our deadline by the end of this year under the Growth Management Act. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Christian.
Thanks, Jason. As mentioned, we are on the last phase. We are just hovering over this preferred alternative decision. So with that, we will shift into that final plan, the final EIS, and work towards completing the legislative process this year. A lot of work, as Jason mentioned, has gone into it. We're going to touch on some of that this evening. These first few slides are really just high level. Then we'll get into the details. I want to talk briefly about just the overall sort of recentering, refocusing of the comp plan for you all and for those watching. Then jump into the future land use map, the FLUM, focusing on that as it's the foundation for what we are, what all the other elements are based on. Touch briefly on engagement that we've completed and talk about the impact summary under the EIS that Planning Commission was really focused on. And we'll continue to look at that with the final draft, the final EIS and the final draft. And then we'll touch at the end tonight on upcoming meetings. So to recenter us, this slide, it represents the complexity that we are faced with having to align vertically with the GMA, with the multi-county planning policies and the countywide planning policies, not just for King County, but Snohomish County, and how that has to line up with everything that we are doing in the comp plan and then in the regulations. So there is a step 2 with the comp plan. There's the immediate zoning regulations, zoning map and regulations that we'll be looking at before the end of the year. And then there are those that will come subsequently that we do have time for. There are some requirements that have to be completed. So we've approached it this way, and through these areas of focus this year, having to incorporate a few new items, new changes that weren't just, as far as the growth allocations in past periodic updates, cities and counties have had a growth target. We had to break that apart into affordable housing bands and that complexity and figure out what the policies behind those changes were going to be. This was the first periodic update that incorporated a DEI element, lens, and the climate element and implementation piece, all of which have had tremendous amount of influence from the community through those engagement activities, and will help us really move forward, especially the implementation plan and how we can work through this in the future in the coming years. We're not going to dive into all the elements, as I mentioned. We're going to focus primarily on land use. Jesse's going to jump into how the land use element was sort of created and how we landed on the alternative 2.5. And so with that, I'll let you take that away.
Thanks, Christian. Jesse Hartman with Burke Consulting. Nice to finally see you all in face and not just as a list online. So I'm going to speak to the land use element a little bit and really kind of the targets and capacity and how that led us into this kind of hybrid alternative. So the land use element is really central to all other elements of the plan. It essentially describes how land should be used in the city, which then guides growth and investment over the next 20 years. And that direction is really encapsulated in this proposed future land use map. I've always heard it say FLUME, actually, so that's really interesting, FLUM. But future land use map, and then kind of the accompanying future land use designations. And those designations really indicate the kind of higher general types and intensities of allowed use in a specific area, and then that's implemented by the more specific zoning regulations. So we looked at 3 alternative land use scenarios in the draft plan and draft DIS, the no action and the 2 action alternatives, neighborhoods and centers. And then we've worked, staff and the consultant team with Planning Commission to identify that kind of recommended hybrid alternative. And so one of the kind of foundational requirements here for the periodic update is to plan for your fair share of growth. These targets are set regionally by King and Snohomish County, which you have the lucky fortune of being within both of those, and then in coordination with the cities within. Citywide, Bothell's adopted targets are for 12,782 new housing units and 18,205 new jobs by 2044, with those specific kind of housing targets by income band that Christian was mentioning. So that's all shown here. And then we've compared capacity under the draft alternatives as well as the hybrid alternative relative to these targets, along with other city objectives. So this and the next slide detail the capacity analysis by income level for the hybrid alternative specifically. This slide shows the analysis for King County, and then the next one is going to be for Snohomish. Consistent with the guidance from Commerce, we've kind of grouped the capacity or the targets by these 3 different housing needs. So we kind of have the lower income housing needs from 0 to 80%, and then 80 to 120 for moderate income, and greater than 120 for the higher income brackets. Those different types of housing can meet those housing targets and needs for those various income levels. And so consistent with the Commerce guidance, again, we've assumed that apartments and condos in low and mid-rise buildings can be affordable for households at the lowest income ranges when subsidies are available. And then moderate density or middle housing as well as ADUs are typically affordable for those at the moderate kind of income levels from 80 to 120. And then the detached single-family homes are affordable for households above 120% of area median income. So you can see here there's more than enough capacity at the lower and moderate income levels in King County. It's kind of the far right gray column. The capacity is well above the aggregated target. There is a slight preliminary deficit at the highest income level, but some of that need can be met with the surplus capacity from the moderate density zones, so the kind of middle housing and ADUs. That's appropriate because moderate density housing like townhomes are sometimes only affordable to households at those higher income levels, or they can still be purchased by higher income households even if they are affordable at the lower income levels. So you can see that applied here in that final column, which is the adjusted surplus and deficit. And so we've taken some of the additional, the surplus capacity at the moderate income level, applied it to the higher income level to zero that out, but it reduces the capacity, the surplus capacity at that moderate level. And so then on the next slide, Snohomish County, there's again enough preliminary capacity at the lower and moderate income levels, with some of that extra capacity at the moderate income level shifted to meet the initial deficit at the highest income level. Ultimately, this alternative has enough adjusted capacity at all income levels in Snohomish County, although the surplus capacity is much lower than in King County.
And then I'll turn it back to Christian.
Okay, so we wanted to see and show how they all stacked up. On this slide and the next one's the same, it just highlights a couple of items. Identifies the three initial alternatives as well as the hybrid for Snohomish on the top and King County down below. So what we see here, and I'm gonna jump to the next slide just because it's gonna highlight what was found. The draft capacity for all of these income bands, for both King and Snohomish County, we found that in Snohomish County there was a significant deficit. So the 3612 deficit of the no action for the 0 to 80% and the 1337 for the centers really led the focus towards the neighborhoods. But Planning Commission really liked how the hybrid approach took those draft capacities. This is the maximum amount that we'd be planning for, or could possibly be assumed to develop in those areas and in those income bands. They liked how it was distributed more evenly, less focus within the centers. Their attention to not wanting to have so much impact on specific potentially marginalized populations that may live in or around the existing centers. So pulling in a piece from the neighborhoods, which provides the maximum amount of dispersion with some of those centers aspects is where they ended up guiding us. And that's how we landed with the alternative, seeing a pretty consistent across Snohomish County capacity, well above the targets, the bolded numbers on the top there. And then within King County, significantly higher in the lower band, because it is incorporating the majority of the city in the neighborhoods. And we'll get to some visuals on the draft map to kind of identify where those are focused. It's a lot of information. If there's any questions, please stop us at any time. If you want to talk on these, we can always scroll back up as well. So what does this look like? The hybrid alternative, it included this primary capacity and density policies from all 2 with those aspects of 3, as I mentioned. It redesignates those R7200 zones, the single family or low density zones, to residential medium instead. It increases the floor area ratio slightly within the mixed use neighborhood and mixed use community areas. Those are the lighter purple. Those are some of those aspects that were pulled in from the center's alternative. It does adjust the minimum lot sizes and lot size per units and the density in the RM areas. The one thing that we noticed between the initial draft and this version was based on PSRC and King County comments that the ADUs they serve moderate income households. Bothell's a higher cost community, so they had to be pulled out of that band. So it did shift some things, and that was one of the results in how we needed to expand that capacity elsewhere. And it has come up in the past on fee simple manufactured homes developments. The 3 Holly Hills, Cascade Vista, and Woodcrest Estates, thank you. They all are fee simple properties, residential low designation currently. They would retain that. So there was an initial shift on the first draft of the map that designated them manufactured home park, which is that sort of brownish, light brown under the residential. This corrected that to keep it consistent with all fee simple lots. So wanted to make sure we touched on that. The next slide identifies those areas of change. So peeling back all the complexity of the future land use map, and we'll get to more complexity here in a second, but really focusing it on the RL to RM, the residential low to residential medium throughout the city. And this is how we were able to achieve such high capacities. So the maximum amount we could plan to, which achieved those goals. The other areas, there's a few of them. They're very, very minor. The RL to mixed use neighborhood up on 228th. It's that light purple band, just off 228th, right up here. And then there was a residential load to the downtown transition area, the red, which was previously done in a rezone. So we captured that in this update. And then there's a small city-owned property. You can't even see it along the Sammamish River that was found during this work. So we're capturing it and putting it as a park open space designation. So this represents the areas of change and the future land use. And with that, I want to jump to the next slide, which adds that layer of complexity. So this is part two. This is the representation of the current zoning map, which is a combined land use and zoning map. What we're doing with the future land use map is we're peeling these two apart. We're creating that high level land use designation and then the on the ground zoning. We weren't able to do, it would have been impossible to look at the 57 different zonings and zoning designations and, at the policy level. So we had to get up to that 30,000 foot level and establish that with the future land use map. And we'll come back with, these are what I think of as the levers. So we will establish the capacities with the future land use map. Within the zoning, we establish the levers of how far do we want to be pushing the zoning, the densities within those maximums. I overlaid the two just to give you a sense of what it would look like, and did a quick side-by-side comparison just so you can see that we're really just focusing on the high level. We will get to the zoning designation later this year that is required as part of the update associated with HB 1220 and any other zoning amendments that result from this that can wait and can be done within the first 6 months of 2025. We'll do that as well. Briefly, community engagement, as Jason mentioned, for over a year and a half, we completed a robust community engagement program well before I was here. I started probably the week before the open houses began, which was great to be there. I met a few of you, didn't know who you were at the time. I was told afterwards. Going back in time, there were many opportunities for the community to provide input, whether it was at events through the Engage Bothell platform, and or events like Summer Nights or Sustainamania. And all of those have been fruitful and documented, and a lot of the comments are wrapped into what we've already included. The EIS comments, though, they will be responded to specifically as part of the final EIS, which I'll segue over to Jesse.
Yes, so I'm going to shift directions a little bit here to kind of quickly cover some of the high-level results from the draft EIS. Adoption of your comp plan is considered a non-project action under the State Environmental Protection Act, meaning the city needs to kind of consider the big picture impacts of the proposed changes. So what that means is that we look at probable impacts of housing and job growth over the next 20 years, citywide, as opposed to kind of any specific impacts from any individual development. So we analyzed impacts of the no action alternative, which is just the continuation of your current, your existing plans and policies, and then also that Alt 2 or neighborhoods alternative and Alt 3 or the centers alternative. For each of the topic areas that you see on the left there, for most of those topics, there were no significant and unavoidable adverse impacts identified under any of the alternatives. For water resources and plants and animals, though, there was a moderate, significant, and unavoidable adverse impacts expected under all the alternatives that are just kind of common with urbanization. These are generally cumulative impacts, meaning the combined effects from additional development over time are what result in a significant adverse impact. So, for example, more impervious surface from one individual development could result in additional discharge to waterways, which would then cumulatively impact water quality and habitat as more developments happen. And then a note that while no significant and unavoidable adverse impacts to housing were identified, affordability would continue to be a challenge just because of regional growth pressures. But it would likely improve under the action alternatives, which are the Alt 2 and 3, compared to the no action alternative. And then also kind of existing commitments and partnerships would help mitigate affordability challenges. So the next slide just highlights some of the differences between the two action alternatives for their impacts. For those kind of natural environment impacts, they're expected to be a little bit greater under alternative 2 than 3, just because the growth is more dispersed, which could increase impervious surface area in drainage basins and fragment habitat patches and corridors across the city, as opposed to kind of concentrating that. More and denser residential growth would likely be spread across the residential areas of the city under that neighborhood's alternative, whereas kind of the expected height, bulk, and scale of new development in the centers under alternative 3 would be greater. There's also a slightly higher risk of physical residential displacement, which is essentially when you have kind of this is like eviction or termination of a lease, or if a landlord decided to renovate units to be sold or to lease out at a higher income level, or if buildings are just sold for redevelopment. So that's kind of what physical residential displacement instead of economic residential displacement, which is more like rising housing costs overall cause somebody to choose to move because they can no longer afford to be where they are. So that physical displacement risk is a little higher under Alt 2 because you're emphasizing spreading housing across more areas of the city where housing already exists. I will say it is a very slight difference, but it is there. And then commercial displacement pressures in the existing mixed use and commercial areas would also kind of vary between the two. Alt 2 would probably see more conversion to higher intensity employment uses in the centers, whereas Alt 3 would likely include more service-oriented businesses to support kind of the balance of housing that you'd see in the centers with that alternative. And then also just alternative 3 more closely aligns with PSRC's regional growth strategy, just because you're directing more growth near existing amenities, services, transit. More people would live within a quarter-mile walking distance of transit under alternative 3 than 2, but access to transit would increase under both of them. And then overall, your VMT or vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions would also be slightly lower under alternative 3 than alternative 2, although for both of these, your per capita VMT and GHG emissions would be lower than the no action alternative, which is consistent with regional strategies. So just a clarifying point that Alt 2 is not inconsistent with PSRC's regional growth strategy, it's just slightly less in alignment. And then finally, just that focusing more residential growth in your centers under alternative 3 could result in some efficiencies for service delivery for emergency services and utilities as well, just because you have more people in a kind of concentrated area. And then just the last note here, the final EIS will review the preferred alternative for all of those kind of topic areas again, and compare it to these other action alternatives. So it'll give you some kind of view of where it falls within those.
Okay, so upcoming meetings, we will be preparing a consideration, a resolution to be considered for the July 30th meeting based on feedback tonight, direction tonight. And then this comes back in the fall. We will be back to Planning Commission, to City Council, to run through final drafts. So you will see those. You will see the details of what the preferred alternative looks like. Much of the other elements don't change based on what the drafts propose. There will be some minor shifts, and we'll highlight those. But the majority of the change to the documents that have been produced at this point and online would be within the land use element. And then we'll have further conversation about the associated zoning that runs alongside and is updated at that time. So the hope is to get through early fall into public hearing in November, knowing that we've got a lot of other items to wrap up this year, and that we do have the deadline of December with the comp plan. So with that, we are here for questions and feedback.
Can I leap in while everybody's collecting their thoughts? I'm going to be really interested in seeing that final EIS. It's fascinating to think about. I think that's those unintended consequences of, if you do A, what is going to happen on B. So I'm really looking forward to that. And policy mapping, what a great way for people to get a general idea of what's happening in the city. And you're right, there's a lot of visual clutter when you try to mush it all together. Please thank Planning Commission for all the work that they have put into this. And I know it's not possible to thank the people who have given comment, but there's reams and reams of comments from the public. I've read a lot of it, and I hope that Planning Commission found it helpful. Really thoughtful people live in this city, so my thanks to them as well. I have one question about going back to, I know there'll be another question, but I'm going to yield the floor here after this one. Going back to the fee simple lots and protecting the mobile home, is there legal description of what a manufactured home looks like? Because I'm wondering, could someone aggregate those fee simple lots and put up a modular home? Would it fall into that definition of what a manufactured home might be?
We've looked into the protections that exist within the zoning code. So within the zoning regulations, there are protections for the non-fee simple mobile home,
Right.
Manufactured home parks. For those that are fee simple, we have found, and we are continuing to look at CC&Rs that exist. Some plats have restrictions that prohibit stick frame construction, requiring it to be manufactured construction type.
Okay.
The most recent development, it was, and stop me if you don't want the details, it was Division 9 of Holly Hills. They were pulled out to create their own plat. It was undeveloped land.
Is it that new section as you hit the top of the hill?
Yes, yes. And so changes to Divisions 1 through 8, we're diving in to find out what the CC&Rs say. We have a hunch that they do have prohibitions that would at least require the entirety of the plat, either a singular division or all of the divisions, to approve a change to the plat, which is a plat alteration, which is not an easy task.
Okay.
So between CC&Rs or plat documents,
It'd be really
there
difficult.
can be protections within those.
Okay.
Again, though, there is the ability to explore development regulations if there wasn't that type of protection in existence. But we just haven't seen that happen. We haven't seen lots purchased.
Okay. Well, that helps. I marvel at when someone wants to build something, how they can noodle what the requirements are and find a way to finesse something that approximates what they want. So I'm glad you're asking the questions about CC&R and complications if they'd want to change the plats. It sounds like the whole group, like Hollywood Hills, would have to just go ahead and as a group, decide that they were going to change and then go through a whole legal description?
Potentially.
Changing. Okay.
Yes, yes. And we can definitely come back this fall with the clarity once we have that detailed information.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you.
Similar question, and this may be an I don't know, but on a manufactured housing fee simple lot, if there's a manufactured home on it, can they also build an ADU on it?
The opportunity does exist. I've asked staff that question, and they have explored that on certain topics, certain developments. Division 9, within that prohibition on primary residence being precluded from stick frame construction, it actually allows an ADU to be stick frame construction, understanding it's going to be smaller scale. And there are other things to consider: setbacks, impervious surface, stormwater regulations, and all those things to evaluate. And they are much smaller lots. As a whole, they make up the average lot size, but the lots themselves are a little bit smaller.
Okay, question came up when you were presenting, and I figured I'd ask, even though it was kind of obscure and bizarre. But a question on the housing targets. I know like a housing unit could hold one person, it could hold 10 people. When they come up with these targets, how do they determine how many units or how many people will be in each unit? Is there a consistent way in both counties, or is it different? Is it estimated based on what they currently know from like a census file? How is that determined?
So it is not consistent between the two counties, which makes it complicated. Snohomish County has population targets as well. I don't know specifically what they use to convert kind of their housing target to population target, but they're actually kind of going backwards the other way because OFM gives population growth numbers to them. So so you have a population target for Snohomish County, which in the draft EIS, we looked at that briefly, but not in detail because you're fine under any of the alternatives. King County doesn't set a population target. You just have a housing and employment target. We did convert what we thought kind of the units to population would be based on the average household size for the King County portion of the city, and then also kind of pulled out what the average household size for downtown is specifically, and calculated for units expected in downtown, what would that convert to, because the household size was slightly different. So those numbers are there, and they are not consistent, and I wish they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one more question on the splits of affordability. I mean, looking at the numbers for affordability, sub 80% specifically, is just, I mean, it's like the estimates are staggering. And a land use code change, like that's not going to solve the problem. It's going to help, but it's not going to solve the problem. For that number, it's like astronomical. Are they doing anything else to help with that, or are we just being told like we need to plan, we need to change code to allow it to happen, but there's no like real plan to actually make it happen to meet the needs?
Yeah, part of it is, I think that kind of first step is just making sure there is capacity for that. So removing any barriers to that. There are proposed policies throughout the plan, I think, that would also support that kind of development, and also emphasizing just the city's commitment to working with partners for that, recognizing that in general, the lowest income households, their housing needs have to be met typically with subsidies. It's not going to be met with market rate housing. So it's going to require those partnerships and kind of ongoing commitments. I know the city already does work with I always forget the acronym, ARCH, thank you. I don't know why that one doesn't stick in my head, but you do already work with several partners, and you've committed a certain amount of dollars based on your population to help with that kind of funding, as regional look at housing in the area. So it is one piece of the puzzle to make sure you have capacity, and that is the legal requirement you have to do. There are also in the the countywide planning policies for King and Snohomish, there are requirements for you to make a commitment in some meaningful way, whether that's through the kind of additional policies that support or your other implementation strategies to help meet that need.
Okay. Yeah, I thought about those things. I thought about the Arch partnership, things like tonight, the passing of the property for affordable housing. But when you combine all those things together, you're still not going to come anywhere close to that. And really the only way to balance the price of housing is to have enough capacity, enough housing actually built and available to drive down prices or even stabilize them. So I don't know, it's tough. It's a tough problem. And I don't know that anybody really has the answer to that, but things I was thinking about as I was looking about that, similar, the number of jobs. I looked at that and I was like, where are all those people going to work? Because there's not a lot of extra space to build buildings. And we have some good buildings in town that I don't think are past their prime yet. They're not like Class C buildings where you'd want to knock it down and build something bigger and better. So I don't know, thinking about that too, like where are all those people going to come and work? What available land is there to hold that capacity of employee? And, you know, is that the best, is continuing to put people on the road rather than telecommuting the best way to go about doing business as a region? And that's I guess another policy question for a body larger than ours. It's not a city-based policy question, but it makes it difficult to plan for that kind of capacity and influences the effects on climate, the effects on the streams and rivers and the environment. And I wish there was some way we could put that as maybe there is a policy goal or something we encourage within there, telecommuting versus commuting via transit, which is better than commuting via a single occupancy vehicle.
And there's definitely emphasis on that in the plan with, I mean, you have your new kind of multimodal levels of service too. So there's other pieces that are going into supporting people not just driving to work. The employment is definitely focused under really, which any of these alternatives, it's really focused in your existing kind of employment centers or mixed use centers. So it's primarily Canyon Park and then North Creek, and downtown obviously has some capacity as well, but those are your kind of two big ones. The telecommuting piece and the kind of how people get to their jobs there is an emphasis placed on the plan on allowing people to not have to rely on single occupancy vehicles.
Great, thank you.
I was going to sneak in just to your point about encouraging telecommuting and stuff. That came up in a roundabout way on K4C before I stopped being the K4C person. And I had brought up my own experience as a tech worker. When I worked in Seattle, we had a bus pass that was free. It was very easy to just encourage people to drive. We didn't have paid parking. Working now at my company in Bellevue, there's discounted parking. I know a lot of other people in similar roles who have completely free parking. There's no bus pass. You can set aside some pre-tax money in a fund. Mine's been there since COVID because I had a large balance and then I didn't take the bus for a while. But regionally, we need to encourage employers to set policies that encourage these things. Especially, I've seen a lot more people with jobs like mine be told, and be there 3 days a week now. Doesn't matter if your coworkers are there. So I would say let's make use of our regional committees too, because I think that's a big thing, and we can't solve it as Bothell. But if we work with other cities where a lot of these jobs are, we can hopefully find good harmony.
I'll jump in. I appreciate this. I appreciate the work that's been put into this. I'm comfortable with the hybrid alternative and staff's recommendation on that. Two things that I would like to bring up that I know we've talked about before, but probably before you were here, Christian, and I'm just not sure if things kind of made it in. It's not that big of a deal. Don't give me that look, Jason. That's the terrified look. I'm sorry. I know we've talked about corner stores. And I mean, having those be legal everywhere. And I would also like childcare to be a legal use everywhere in the city as part of this work. Because we we are short childcare, and it's a really, really big problem, and I'd like to remove any barriers the city erects toward providing that service to our community. Yeah.
Can I just, enter in that conversation? I love the idea of corner stores a lot. I wonder how economically feasible they are. Remember, I was talking with a developer once, and they were saying we can't do restaurants unless if there's at least, I forget what the number was. It was a huge number of units there. So I don't know how we can encourage corner stores to exist. That's a question for a later date, but I do worry that people will go, it's just not economically feasible.
I think step one is allow them everywhere. And like, I don't know if the encouragement of them is something that's really germane to the comp plan or not, but like, I think kind of step one is just make them legal and give people the option if they want to do that. And that's what I'd like to do through the comp plan.
And maybe have a lot of flexibility of what they look like.
I'm totally game for that.
Yeah, that's a cool thought. I think that we've, deja vu, I was like sitting right here saying it, so I'm sure it's been brought forward before. I want to thank Burke for continuing to listen to Planning Commission. When I was in Planning Commission, I could see where I would hear from the community, or I would have a realization about something, and then I would bring it up, and then I could see it moving along. So I just really appreciate that the continued public engagement is worthwhile. I think that it's so easy to get these numbers thrown at us, and it's kind of disembodied, but I think it's still very worthwhile to engage the community and really listen. And the intent is that, our voices are going to be on this document, and I think that Burke was really creative and helpful during that process. So I also think that the hybrid option is really creative. I think it's really good. One of the things that I had and held deeply going into this process is seeing the environmental injustice of sort of the urban village hypothesis and experiment that happened in Seattle, and concentrating growth and development into corridors around very busy streets. And that was something that really realizing there's this tension between wanting to focus growth near transit and also realizing that transit operates often on busy roads that are not really people-centric. And so I appreciate that, Planning Commission had some similar realizations and thoughts, and that this hybrid option is started trying to get to a little bit better environmental justice from that perspective too, for populations who have been underserved or who frequently, have gotten the short end of the stick in terms of development in the past. So I appreciate that. The housing numbers, I also agree, are like staggering, and we don't really know how we're going to get there, but this is about capacity. And so I think that the hybrid alternative really gets to good capacity numbers, and whether or not we will achieve those numbers, that's not really for the comp plan to decide. It's more for implementation. So I'm happy to understand and see that implementation is being thought of. It's an element of the plan, and going forward, we'll continue to see updates on that. The last kind of thought that I had scrolling through the packet and really reading all of the input that went in was that I'm really excited that there's a long list of public comment, and one of the things that I hear a lot when I talk to people who don't have any context for local planning or what zoning is and is not, is they say, why do we have to do this? Like, what's the purpose? And I think it's spelled out really nicely. Like 30% of our budget comes from regional grants, and so there is an impetus to do this We are part of a region. We do need to take on growth. It is part of the understanding of being a city in Washington State. And also, taking on growth does help with urban sprawl, which is a significant portion of degradation of the environment outside of city boundaries. And so, the work that I did out of college and understand from, local, other local jurisdictions is that there's not this emphasis on making capacity and housing for people in cities. And so I'm really proud that Bothell is sort of like taking on our mantle and saying this is something that we need to do, and understanding, why is because we're losing our forests, our working forests and farmlands at an inordinately fast pace. And those lands, once they're converted to housing, never turn back into natural spaces. And so I'm really proud of the work that's been going into this. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for working through all the staffing challenges and onboarding and debriefing different generations of staff throughout this process. I think that for that whole process, it's been really helpful to see, the continuous line that we're here tonight. So it's really exciting for me to see. Thanks.
I'm not going to say it any better, so wholeheartedly ditto to Councilmember Kurt's comments, and this is great. I actually have no questions, which is maybe a first. I'm going to write that down. We'll see how it goes, but thank you.
Thank you. I am not going to say again, it's late. My English as a second language brain is shutting down. The question I have is about the flume. I like the French pronunciation. Or original German, yeah, I like that. There's the Muga map part of this. This is a 20-year plan. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but what might happen in the future in that little gap we have between, Bothell and.
Are you asking how the flum relates to the Muga?
Boom.
Well, don't we have to plan for our Muga? Like, that's part of our requirement. I think we have to account for it because the county at some point.
Though, in this thing?
That's why there's the colors there. Like, we have to do some planning. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's.
I should have also brought this up 2 weeks ago, whenever we last met, and there was this section on like what meetings we were. I was at Snohomish County Tomorrow, filling in last month, and they were talking about their own comprehensive plan. And so in our Muga, there are redesignations of certain property, certain parcels and swaths of our Muga into different. They're not zones; they're more like flavors. And so I'm realizing that their process is running simultaneously. So the county's process is running simultaneously to ours, and so our Muga doesn't reflect the map up here doesn't reflect the flume. The flume doesn't reflect some of the changes that are being proposed concurrently by Snohomish County, and so it's kind of leapfrogging. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So, yes, they are. The processes are running concurrently. There are some things that could change down the line. In what we've done here is generally treat the Muga the same as the county has. So, because it's not really in the city of Bothell, so you kind of like their zoning and their land use are what continue to apply until if it were to be annexed into the city, then yours would step in. And so the idea is to have some consistency with what's kind of in place for that. Obviously, the city could choose to say you would like to have a slightly different vision for an area than what the county might have. But the reality is that some of the, a lot of it is built out or built already or developed. So trying to keep those plans in generally in line with one another is pretty good practice. There you're probably referring to the potential boundary changes for the UGA. Is that?
No, there's their own flume.
Yes, so they have different designations as well, and so we tried to keep the kind of intent of their designations similar to yours without also then introducing, I can't remember how many they have, but introducing their specific terms and designations as well. So the intent of what is shown up there is trying to be in line with that. You could reconcile that after the county adopts their comp plan, which presumably will happen this year. Obviously, yours will also happen this year. Theirs will probably be adopted before yours, but that wouldn't give a lot of time to kind of to make those changes right now. But you can do that in the future too.
I'll also just make one quick point for the record. The county has proposed expanding the urban growth area at the northeast corner of the city. So the Muga would would get a little bit bigger. And we have expressed some concerns to the county during their public process about that, and encourage the county to try to accommodate their growth targets within their existing boundaries. So we're continuing to work with the county on that proposed expansion, and that would have to be part of a larger conversation with PSRC down the line. And we'll talk about that in the final version of the plan as well.
And we will still have the annual comp plan amendment process if something crazy happens in the next 3 years, correct?
Yes, we'd come back every year to clean up any little pieces, or if annexation is on the horizon and there's some consistencies to work out for portions or all of the Muga, then that would be part of that work as well.
Well, I don't want to repeat too much, but I really do appreciate Planning Commission proposing the hybrid alternative. And thank you, staff, for being receptive to that and doing all of, not just the legwork that brought them the first alternatives, but then the work after the fact to create that hybrid. And I guess some of the questions that I had have sort of been answered, and I really appreciate Councilmember Curd bringing up the impacts to our rural areas if we don't take action, if we're not willing to participate in this regional effort to plan for the GMA and all of that. And so I was going to ask you to speak to the impacts to outside of Bothell if we don't take action, but I feel like Councilmember Curd addressed that really nicely. And you answered my question about, do we have an impact summary for the hybrid alternative, the alternative 2.5? And your answer was, you will, just not right now. And that's fantastic. And then on page 146 of the packet, you actually go into greater detail about the likely impacts and as well as the mitigation options. In the slideshow, you didn't necessarily get into mitigation options. And so I really do appreciate how clearly outlined this is. Yes, there can be impacts of densifying and, and continuing to grow within our city. And there's also options available to us. And so my question is, I know this is not part of the comprehensive plan, but over the next 10 years, will you please continue to bring us mitigation options? And if there are additional options that are not listed in here, can we just be proactive about trying to reduce our natural and environmental impacts? And so I think that we our planning commission's really great. They have an eye out for that, and they're actively pursuing and talking about those options for the city, and I really appreciate that. And I think our council is also motivated to do that as well. So I would just, I guess my ask is, can we continue partnering on on like ambitious and innovative mitigation going forward beyond the comprehensive plan process.
I mean, absolutely. I think three of the first key implementation steps that we plan to take include developing an urban forestry management plan, a climate action plan, and then also focusing on downtown. And so all of those elements help mitigate the impacts of the larger plan. And we're not wasting any time in that we're already scoping those out. And they'll also achieve part of the council's vision that was articulated last year. So we're certainly committed to that.
I love it. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that we address the childcare and the corner stores thing. Is any part of that in the plan so far? I don't think we've talked about childcare much, but I know we've talked about the corner stores.
So that is in part in the plan already. I think we could probably place more emphasis on it, and I'd have to look up specific policies. I know there is a policy around childcare because I wrote it, and I just don't remember what it is right this moment. And then there's definitely policies around supporting corner stores, and really one of the best ways that you would see those is to increase density to support that kind of development. So I think you're right. Allowing, like, step one is allowing them, and then step two is allowing the density to support them, and then there's probably further things you could do. But we can take another look and make sure there's policies for both of those in there.
Okay, awesome. I feel like we're getting to the speak now or forever hold your peace part of this, and I just want to make sure that is something that's included. And if you need hands raised around or want to go around the corner, I'm happy to, but I know we've talked about both of those in the past. So I want to make sure that those aren't illegal anywhere in Bothell.
And Mayor, I think it's a good segue into sort of the wrap up too, is that as noted in the introduction and in the agenda bill, the intent is to come back on the 30th with a resolution that will really capture then what were the directions that we came out of tonight's meeting, so that there's clarity on what to expect. I think from tonight's meeting, there's enough direction too that Burke will continue on the path, and we won't wait for the 30th, but I think that's a good checkpoint of when you see it in your packet and it's spelled out, if there's anything that needs to be further emphasized, but we want to report back of like, here's what we heard, did we capture it? And those will be in whereas clauses, and it'll give us something that when we come back in the fall, as Christian mentioned, some of the deadlines on that, it'll give an opportunity of going back and remembering where did we walk away from here tonight. So the hope is to make sure there's clarity, that you don't have to wait with bated breath for October to be like, did they hear me?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're good. We'll see you soon.
Yep.
All right, next up, we have another study session, a review of proposed policy on technology, intelligence, surveillance, and information. It's Agenda Bill 24121, and I tried to talk slowly enough for you to get back here. Talking slowly is hard for me.
A+ work.
And I'll kick it over to our city manager.
Mayor, you can appreciate when I'm bringing up slides, how it's hard for me to stall for my own time.
Yes,
so
very much so.
Very similarly. Well, thank you, Council. The last study session tonight is a review of some proposed policy on technology, intelligence, and surveillance. Really, the bottom line of this is that this is an opportunity for Council to weigh in early on a policy that the chief has envisioned in terms of how do we, before we set out to evaluate technology options, how do we set the parameters of what will be the acceptable uses that we would even consider? So this sort of becomes as we develop this policy, it tells us which directions would we go, because there's many paths that will come up, and over the years there will probably be needs to adjust this. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our Chief of Police, Ken Suerlich, to frame this and a little bit more about his vision before we dive into the policy. Chief?
Thank you very much, City Manager. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. For those in the audience, my name is Ken Strubelek. I'm the Chief of Police. This project was born out of a technology conference as part of the International Association of Chiefs of Police that I attended. And what I recognize, and I think all of us know this, is that technology is moving at a rapid rate. And it impacts our lives on a daily basis. And I am older, so sometimes technology scares me. And so I will just say that part of that for me was, where are the guardrails on this? And so I started doing some research, and I found that there were not a whole lot of policies out there that really framed or gave a foundational framework for technology in law enforcement. And we all know that law enforcement uses technology. So to be a good partner with our community, I think it's really incumbent upon us to have a foundational framework that all of our other technologies operate out of. And this is a draft version of this format. We normally would present this at our public safety committee meetings, but we don't do those anymore. So this is the venue for that. And the real positive part of that is that I think it helps with communication to all of the council on the things that we're working on. So with that, I'll turn this over to Captain Mike Johnson, who has been my partner on drafting this policy.
Thank you, Chief. Like you said, it's tough when you can't borrow other policies to review before you start writing one, because there was a lack of policy. So I want to start by thanking you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. We do really appreciate and value your time for having us come in and present the policy to you. And as a reminder, when I start the program here, there is no policy ask tonight. There's no action that we're asking for you to take. If it will go. There we go. Yeah, speaking of technology, I was the right guy to write the policy. We're here tonight to review the police department's technology policy and discuss how and why we got here. We're looking forward to hearing your thoughts, insights, and your feedback. We want to be sure this policy aligns with the values of our community. We also want to assure you that as we research, adopt, and implement new technologies and services, the department is committed to engaging with the council and the community along the way. Technology within the criminal justice system is evolving at a rapid pace. New and innovative products and services are emerging quicker than anyone would have anticipated. These products and services are having an impact in almost every aspect of our service delivery. To continue to provide solid guidance to our team members, the police department has drafted a policy addressing our use of technology, information, intelligence, and surveillance. This policy provides guidance and oversight into how the department uses data, information, and intelligence, and more importantly, it advises how we're not going to use it. This overarching policy also provides the philosophical structure of how we use technology and how we will ensure our community's privacy and civil liberties are protected. As mentioned, this policy will guide our work by providing structure on how and why team members use technology and information services. This policy provides structure to areas of emerging technology that might not otherwise be covered immediately. As new services are coming online, such as ChatGPT or other AI applications, we need to ensure we're following our guiding principles as an organization. Team members need to have clear understanding of how and when we use technology and information services. This policy clearly outlines the need for our technology to be used for law enforcement purposes and provides for monitoring and auditing to assure compliance. This policy also outlines prohibited uses. The policy provides guidance pertaining to data. All data obtained through our use of technology and information services will be maintained in accordance with applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations. The policy addresses the need to ensure data is not provided to third parties unless it's specifically authorized or required by law. Trust with the public is one of the cornerstones for the success of any police agency. A primary goal of this policy being enacted is to maintain trust with our community. This policy will ensure the department will use technology to continue to diligently and efficiently safeguard our community while protecting the privacy interest and civil liberties of those who live, work, and visit the city of Bothell. As we move into the next phase of technology implementation in criminal justice, we are looking to expand and/or enhance some of the services we are already utilizing. This policy provides additional guidance and restrictions to ensure any expansion of our technology is done through engagement and with thoughtfulness and intentionality to safeguard the rights of our community. Automated license plate readers, or ALPRs, have been deployed in our school zone since the fall of 2023 and have played a key role in our school zone safety program. As outlined in the April 2nd staff report, the department has begun analysis regarding the potential use of red light camera enforcement systems at intersections with high occurrences of red light infractions and where there's a high frequency of cars stopped in the intersection, or as the chief has coined the phrase, blocking the box. As we look forward, we see opportunities to expand our ALPR program to include systems we could utilize to more efficiently fight crime by providing more exact vehicle information and locations and reduce extraneous law enforcement contacts. ALPR systems will be used to locate amber or silver alert subjects. ALPRs have been used throughout our state to apprehend suspects in serious felony crimes, including homicide and kidnapping. ALPRs have also been shown to greatly improve law enforcement's ability to recover stolen vehicles. The department has also been using remotely operated aerial systems, or drones, for the past several years. As we look forward, we see an opportunity to expand our use of drones to include a new program called Drones as a First Responder. The idea includes drones being dispatched to some of our calls for service to provide situational awareness prior to officers arriving. This provides for greater safety to our community as well as our first responders. Throughout the city, there are numerous cameras already deployed, both public and private, for various purposes. The police department will look to partner with our community to leverage these systems to enhance our ability to provide effective, efficient police services. Being able to review camera footage will allow our officers to more precisely identify criminal suspects and the vehicles they use. This technology could significantly reduce extraneous police contacts with uninvolved persons and reduce the potential for pursuits as suspects might otherwise be identified. As with all technology and information, this policy governs use as well as the restrictions of using these systems. This policy will also help inform us on our potential use of future technology that we may utilize. The department is researching the implementation of body-worn cameras to enhance accountability and transparency. This policy will help guide the development of the body-worn camera program to ensure we are acting in the interest of our community while safeguarding privacy concerns and civil liberties. As you can see, this policy covers a wide range of technology and information services. We are implementing this policy to ensure tech is being used by authorized personnel for authorized purposes and with a high regard to the privacy and the civil liberties of our community. We very much look forward to your feedback and insight to ensure we are aligned with the people we serve. And with that, I think we will entertain questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Because I hadn't heard you mention it, and I know that you do. The chief has your advisory committee. I don't know what you call it. I'm sorry, but you have your group of people that are members of the community who come in to advise. And so I am wondering, what role did they play in helping you prepare this policy, and what was some of their feedback that you took into account as you worked on this?
Great question. It was real interesting. They brought up technology ideas for us to utilize. And that really started down a path of, okay, well, we need to start framing this and prioritizing how we move forward. And I'll use body cameras as an example. That was one of the key topics that was brought up in, wondering how we operate our body camera program. We don't have a body camera program. And so that generated, well, what other technologies do you have out there? So they were key in framing this and kind of giving us the idea of the things to talk about. But beyond that, it's community members, conversations I've had, frankly, some of which have been generated from conversations I've had with council members, other police agencies, to really kind of address this missing link. And it's exactly that. It's the community outreach. We've had legal review on this. We've had this looked at by our DEI coordinator to ensure that we are given this the proper lens as we're moving forward. And the other thing to keep in mind too is this is a living document, like all of our policies. And so as things change and things evolve, we make those changes. The real goal with this one is this is this anchor. And so we have this tech and surveillance policy that connects to our UAS, our ROAS or drone policy, that would connect to how we use GPS trackers. And that is the part that's really been missing, that frankly caused me concern. And as I talked to community members at Coffee with a Cop, our most recent one up north, that was the same feedback I was getting from community members. They want to know that when we're using technology, that we have clear guidelines. And what do we do if an officer violates that? And we have policies in place on, access violations, which is the computer system that we run names. But I wanted to make sure that that is really spelled out clearly in this foundational document, and that things would be audited, and they're audited in a timely fashion. Especially considering that we're accredited, those things are important. I will also say that a number of agencies have already hit us up wanting a copy of this once we go to print. But does that kind of help address some of those questions?
Yeah, it does, and I'm really glad to hear all of the ways, and I've seen the ways that you engage with our community. But I think a piece that may be missing in that is, has your advisory body been able to review a draft of this before it came to us?
That's a great question. I will say fundamentally their comments helped frame this, but before I took it back to them, I wanted to find input from my council members.
That is definitely one way to do it. And so here we are. And so with that background, I would very much urge you to listen to the lived experiences of the people that serve on that body. I think I would benefit from hearing their feedback before it comes to council, and that's fine. And at the same time, if that's not the case, then I would just very strongly urge you to make sure that they are being heard, especially those with well, we'll go into it that way. I will frame it this way, that one of the biggest areas of need in our community is around behavioral health. And behavioral health, while maybe nestled under disability, is not necessarily considered a protected class. And I just want to make sure that these policies that you write are being looked at by people with lived experience in one of the biggest areas of need in our community. I think that's just really important. People have to be able to be safe enough to approach our public safety professionals, because it's not just officers, it's also our crisis responders. And if they don't feel safe approaching those who are entrusted with providing support and services in crisis, then we are missing the point. We've lost the plot of why these services exist. People have to be safe enough to access them. And so their voices are going to be incredibly important as you develop this policy. And so I just, I know that you will, but I just want to say that please listen to your council, like to
Advisory committee.
advisory
Yeah.
committee. Thank you. Listen to your advisory committee, because I think that those experiences are very important.
Absolutely, and thank you for reiterating that. Just so everybody kind of understands, my goal is I believe in the no surprise rule as we, as a police department, move forward with things. I don't want you to hear it secondhand through somebody in the community that the police department's working on something. I'd rather come to you first and let you hear it, because I also know that you're contacting people in the community, and I know that you will provide feedback to me. And so I think that's really important. And absolutely, people with lived experiences, that has been a key component to our organization from when we started the radar program to now the RACER program. And it'll be super important as we develop other policies and as other technologies potentially come online. That, and I will use an example, though things may not be a protected class, there are things that we can do organizationally to, I'll just use body cams as an example. If you're responding to a behavioral health situation that isn't a threat, then there's really no need. A lot of other agencies, they just don't record that. They don't have body cameras on and activated on those types of calls. So that's one of those things you talk about with your community. You take that input and you help use that to help frame it. Policies to help make sure that whatever we're using meets the standards required, as well as ensure public safety. And that boils down to ensuring their privacy as well.
Well, I very much appreciate this. I know Captain Johnson 3 years ago, before I joined this council. He had a lot of fun talking to me, especially about the drone policy, especially as a member of an impacted community, potentially, maybe not through this department, but others. So I very much appreciate the proactiveness of this. And Chief, we spoke briefly about this, so I thank you for doing this. I read through the policy. I mean, it's still draft form, and you're gathering input, and it's not final. I appreciate that. I think that we're going to have a really good policy for our department. I really worry about the vendors who we're going to procure this technology from. When you start going to AI, I mean, it's a big loaded term. I mean, I'm a tech guy, but but it requires a lot of data. And when a for-profit corporation is trying to sell a police department a lot of data, I can only imagine, because their motives are, let's make the most amount of money out of this thing. And let's take this data from this entity and try to sell it to this other entity. They talk about de-identification and privatization, all that stuff, but it's really easy to triangulate and do this. For example, the GPS tracker. I mean, they purchase a bunch of poor folks, they have Androids. Don't get Android, upgrade to iPhone. Androids, they have apps, but no, because Androids
Rami knows his stuff about security, so
by design, it's much easier to put a bunch of junk on somebody's phone and start grabbing a bunch of information, and those app developers, they sell it to those other entities, who then sell it to the PDs or other companies, or other entities. So I really worry. I don't know how much we can. Maybe that's not maybe necessarily part of this particular policy, but it could point to something where each vendor will get reviewed, like what's their data policy, what's their, not just privacy policy, their retention policies, how they collect the data, all these things. Because that really affects us, because some of those folks are going to be Bothell residents. So some of them might not be. So that's the thing I wanted to talk about.
Hi. I can
invoked a lawyer.
help phone a friend here for PD. It's like you were listening in on our conversations. I think you're right, is the policy is one piece of this, right? And we can build in protections for Bothell residents through our policy, but you have it exactly right. Any vendors are not bound by Bothell policy. The way they're going to be bound is through their contractual obligations with us. So as we work on the contracts, by the way, I cannot say how much I appreciate the opportunity to talk about contracting, because as the city manager knows, I am a contracting nerd, and I make people do a lot of things that maybe they don't want to. But this is a prime example of why contracts matter. Contracts matter a lot. And so the input we get tonight will be helpful, not just for the tech policy, but for all of the contracts that go through and speak to any of the tech purchased by the PD. So I don't know if that helps, but I just wanted to let you know that that's keen on in the back of my mind of policy binds us. The vendors are bound by our contract.
I was just going to say, and that is one of the key components that I was looking at when we were first looking at ALPRs for school zones. And we started talking about third-party vendors and, selling of data. So that's when this first came up for me, to just ensure, and just by the way, that is covered in our contract with our ALPRs. But I wanted to make sure as we move forward that we have those safeguards in place. And you're spot on. I mean, if people are worried about their data and they carry a smartphone, well, there's a reason why they know what you're interested in when you log into Prime. And so for us, for like GPS trackers, though, it's not a phone-based thing. I just want to clear that up. It's an actual physical device that we normally use, like with a warrant or a bait thing. But absolutely, anybody that we contract with, and that was, I don't want to go down Minority Report, but it's kind of one of those things where I have deep concerns about data and how we use it, and again, the importance of having clear guardrails, and that has a lot to do with those contracts.
Yeah, as we venture, so I use GPS because I had another conversation earlier about how do you track the number of people in a particular area? And it's like you get that from certain vendors, like, OMG. Like they actually can. So how do they do their counts is by, without you knowing, getting the counts.
That's how they know traffic's bad on the road.
So that's the thing that concerns me. And when you start venturing into AI, which requires a lot of data, now things become very fuzzy. And you have profit motive for certain entities, and then you have service motive for us, entities. And it's like, where's the conflict? And this is where the contracts perhaps will help 90% of the time, I guess. But you can't work on the rogue people. But that's the one thing I wanted to just call out specifically. Thank you.
And I would like to just. That is a great point that we were talking about. Artificial intelligence kind of scares me a little bit, and just that it's kind of the Wild West a little bit on some of the businesses are out there. There's an entity that actually has artificial intelligence aided report writing. That concerns me, So again, that's another key component that really caused us to look at this as a framework. So thank you.
I'm going to jump in. Seems like the moment. Thank you for realizing we needed this policy, collaboratively working with community stakeholders, with your advisory group, bringing it to council. Like, I really appreciate all of the work that goes into the final product. And it speaks very well to the way that you want the community to be involved in what happens in our community. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And I did want to second the deputy mayor's concerns about technology and just put my agreement that any contract we sign, I'm kind of looking at Eileen because I know it's contracting. I'm going to go to the contracting nerd, self-identified, and just say that our contracts really do need to spell out that data generated from our use of a vendor's tools cannot be shared, even anonymized. Like, it's wild what just comes in standard terms these days. And a lot of I don't want to say policing because we're talking about actual policing, but a lot of the guardrails are self-imposed with a lot of these technologies. The company you buy from has to believe in doing the right thing, which can be a big ask sometimes for certain companies. So I really appreciate the attention to this. And who knows what we'll be talking about in 5 years at the rate of technology going. But yeah, thank you for this.
Thank you.
I will echo my thanks for being proactive on this. It's encouraging to see that we're not following up because there have been issues, but getting out in front of it. So that's exciting. I have two things that came up when I was reading through the packet. One is sort of like the litany of different kind of people that could be targeted for any specific reason. One of the things that's missing that is sort of science fiction-y, but actually probably not, is genetic people who are impacted by genetic markers. And so I would encourage you to maybe run that through DEI. Just see, I know that when we're talking about getting genetic data, that's something that if it's just like publicly requested, what happens with that? Like that's kind of scary. So something that came up to me. The other thing is public access. 219.7 seems like a really important section. And I would really encourage you and stakeholders to like think of every single word in there as and weigh the benefits or the detractions from saying, is it authorized by the Public Records Request Act or is it required by the Records Request Act? It's just the ability for someone to utilize information from collected from technology through and sort of like hijack the sunshine laws that we have to do harm to someone because of information collected about them is just really kind of top of mind. And so I just really encourage that section to go with a very fine tooth comb. It's really important. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll jump in next. Echoing thanks for jumping out ahead in this and being one of the first to do it. It's always better when you are being proactive and thinking about something before you do it than reactive and doing it afterwards. So I appreciate the work you're doing with your committee as well, or that you will be doing with the committee to run this through. I think technology is both exciting and terrifying. I hate to say that, but it is. It's, there's opportunity to protect people better. I know companies like Axon have the motto, protect life, and they want to eliminate gun deaths, which is amazing. And it's their corporate, what they say. I don't know what they do on the back end, so I won't comment on that, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity to protect people and also to scale our officers so that we don't have to put more bodies on the street. We can use and be smart about how we're doing what we're doing. So there's a lot of opportunity, but also with AI, as pointed out, a lot of potential to go wrong. So I think one thing somebody brought up was, I think it was you, Chief, that brought up was AI report writing. One way to mitigate that is for the processing to happen locally on the machine. We talk about that a lot in my day job, confidential information in HR. If it's processed in the cloud, we don't know where it's going. We don't know who's seeing it, but if it's processed locally, there's much more containment of that data. So one thing to think about there. But in terms of the actual policy itself, one thing I saw that was missing was auditing. I would love to see a section on auditing, how auditing will be done, who's going to do it, how regularly it will be done. And you'll probably want to do that on each individual application, but an overall policy that we will audit and it will be done on a frequent basis to make sure that only the people who are using it should be using it, and anybody who leaves, their credentials are removed so that they're not able to access it remotely afterwards. But I think that's my total feedback. I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to see what opportunities there may be to improve on ways of working and to protect life.
Thank you for the feedback on that. I would say that you're spot on, that the individual policies, whether it's GPS or ROAS drones or body cams, every one of those will be very specific into the auditing because there's also accreditation standards for those. So we'll just be very generic in the foundational of it that audits will occur. We'll really get into the weeds on the individual policies for the individual technologies of how that happens and how often and who will be doing those. And, most of this stuff is, access-based or CGIS-based, which is our system that we run names in, for example. So we will follow those same standards because we have to make sure that we don't have officers writing a report with artificial intelligence, because that's CJIS information. And we can't do that, which is also why I have a artificial intelligence draft policy sitting on my desk right now. So, I mean, these are all things, but they all tie to this particular policy. So thank you. You're spot on.
I had one question that I thought of. The idea of making a records request, as Councilmember Kurtz said, to spy on someone's deeply private moment of crisis is horrifying to me. And I wonder if someone later says, hey, was the camera on when I had this interaction? Is there any sort of process for them to say, can we not have that recorded? Like, can it be deleted? And this is where we might have like records, public records laws, but I'm just wondering, can people speak up and talk about whether that record exists and if it's obtainable by people? How does that work?
Honestly, that would be part of, like, for our body cam, if we decide to go down that road at any particular point, that would have to be part of that process to figure out exactly what the process would be. And the good news is we're not the first to have to deal with this. So there are a lot of other agencies that have already kind of dealt with that. I do agree, though, that there are, I have concerns with public records requests, but we're really bound by the law on what we have to release and the turnaround on that. And I think our city attorney might be able to speak to that a little bit more detail if necessary.
And I can really just speak to it broadly, frankly, because this is one of these things I know exists in the Public Records Act. It's actually pretty specific about when body camera recordings can be released and whom to. I don't have that memorized. It's not like an easy or, if I recall correctly, it takes a little bit of analysis. So I can certainly follow up with you about what that looks like, but Chief's correct that the Public Records Act does speak to it. It speaks to it actually pretty specifically. So happy to follow up with you after the meeting.
Okay. Specificity can be a gift, right? Then you kind of know exactly what to expect. I'm going to put on my pretend Kyle glasses and say that if we maybe find that there is a law that we feel doesn't benefit the people that we protect, we have a legislative agenda and we can try to fight it that way. So please be collaborative. I think any way we can make new technology just less scary right from the bat would be great. So kind of adjacent to this topic, but on my mind as we
Couldn't
talk
agree
about
more.
it.
I just wanted to, I know body camera was brought as an example, but I think it applies to any technology use, for doing the public records request. So like the drone, for example, I know you have policies and all that, but I'm just using it as another example of a technology use that might have records there that's bound by the Public Records Act, so.
Yes,
I'm just using it as an example, but we have to look at those different things also.
absolutely.
Well, I think we're looking at, I'm not trying to be insulting when I call them toys, but we're looking at like the fun stuff here. But we're not looking at like the kind of the day-to-day operations of the police department, because those are phones. Most people are not coming into the police department and saying, hey, I need help. Like, it's phones. And so making sure that those records are also protected. Like, and I've had a long-standing beef with our public records laws anyway, because if it's a medical issue and mental health is a medical issue, that doesn't need to be a public record. And I will say that on the record, just so that people can hear me say that. You don't need to know when you came to my house to treat my mom with COVID. Nobody needs to know that. Like, nobody. And so thank you for giving me the moment to say that. In hearing the conversation, there's been a couple more thoughts that have come up for me. I really appreciate Councilmember Kurd mentioning genetic markers. And so I would also add, I'm on page 154 of the agenda. And I believe this is a list of legally protected classes. But I think it might actually be more expansive than legally protected classes as well. Because I would suggest adding employment status. And I'm just going to speak on behalf of that there are forms of employment that have historically been discriminated against and targeted, especially by police. And so I just want to include possibly employment status as well as housing status. And that is a big issue that just came down from the Supreme Court too, that how we treat people who are unhoused really matters. And they may have fewer protections than we thought they did. So this might be a list of protected, like of legally protected classes. And if it goes beyond that, then I would also consider adding
That's great input.
3 of those
Thank
categories. Thank you.
Last.
Sorry, I got one more. Okay. You mentioned that a lot of like auditing policies are related to accreditation. I really appreciate when a policy links to other policies that govern the policy. So if you were to get up to the line of like, well, I just then be reiterating this policy that exists elsewhere, link to that policy so that people can go deeper and follow the pathway towards, oh, this is actually what's fully governing this. And then somewhere in your contracting process, perhaps, I just want to bring up the software, the training software that you use, to just, when you audit that, make sure that it is being studied, especially for things around like implicit bias, that if a contracted training software comes back with a negative impact that wasn't known previously, but with further research and study is determined like, oh, we didn't know that this was going to be an unintended side effect of this training software. Just have a policy in place that you are actively seeking to update and improve your contracting and vendor relationships. So you're going with like the best evidence-based, and employing best practices.
Absolutely.
In what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
The last comment that I had to share was hopefully you're able to engage, is it ETS? What is our IT department called?
Yeah, employment technology services.
Okay, ETS. Hopefully ETS can have a say, or not a say, but just be able to provide input on, securing data. I just think of like the city of Sammamish, their data leak and compromise. Our systems are held together with very thin threads. And so I'm hoping that, they can provide input that might be valuable to you.
Yeah, absolutely. They are part of the process. And I didn't want to get into like an ETS area necessarily. This is more CJIS, access, civil liberties, whereas the ETS, they really kind of get down into the ones and zeros on the programming side of things. But absolutely, we'll ensure that we're working with them. They're a key partner, a stakeholder in this.
I have a couple things. First, just I love that we're doing this, and I love that we're doing this when there's not other policies to be able to look for, because somebody has to go first. And it's hard to do that, but we are making it easier for other jurisdictions down the road to do the right thing. And I am never happier than when we are doing things first that are good, that are needed, that other folks can follow. And so, thank you. This makes my heart warm. 2 specific thank yous. First to the deputy mayor for really making this a focus of council. Your lived experience is super important here, and I really appreciate your voice in all of this. And to the department for following through, because we've had these conversations around a data framework, but like we weren't pushing you on it. Like I did not realize like this work was happening in the background and coming back. And you brought it back to us on your own. And that responsiveness really endangers trust. So just thank you. Like, you heard us, we didn't push you on it, and like this was happening in the background, and that's amazing. The vendor contract thing, and I don't know if this is a question for the contract nerd. She's got a new name. Our wonderful city attorney. Like, is there a way we can create like draft language, or like, hey, if you want to work with us, like here's what the contract has to say? Is that what that looks like? Or is there a like list of here are the qualifications? I guess, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I've seen it done a couple of different ways, and I was looking at just what some of the other cities have done specifically around FLOC or ALPR. With the contracts, there's typically two parts of the contracts. There's the request for proposals or the invitation to bid or whatever our contracting mechanism is that says, hey, vendors, we're interested, give us a proposal. And then we would say in the scope of work, here's our deal breakers. Here's what you need to provide. But what we're seeing more with the ALPR cameras too is here's what you cannot do with our data, especially with the ALPR cameras where you have things called hot lists, where you might have sharing between different law enforcement agencies. So that's what I'm seeing is in the request for proposals, but then also in the contract language that says, this is how you're going to behave with our data. Here's how you're going to share it with other agencies or not. Here's how you're going to notify us if you get requests from other agencies for our data, that kind of a thing. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach.
Awesome. And is there a way that we can make sure that's actually happening?
Probably me.
Okay. Like, because once the data goes out there, like if people sell that data, if people do something, if they use that data, like how would we know?
Sorry, it's late. I misunderstood your question.
Yeah.
I think that gets to auditing, and I mean, I think we would have to talk about what that looks like. Who has the capacity to do it? Because I just don't know in Bothell if anybody has the capacity to really audit these third-party vendors. That's just a question I couldn't answer. Hopefully, as PD is having these conversations with the vendors and with their counterparts across the state, I'm sure we're not the only ones having this conversation. I know for a fact Seattle City Council just had this conversation, I think, like a month ago. So I was looking at their materials to bone up for tonight, but.
I think one thing we can do, I've noticed from just my day job, is that we can put a clause in there saying that we have the right to bring in a third-party auditor to audit their systems. That at least puts more fear into them that we have the right to do that at any time. And whether or not we do it, I don't know, but
They know we can.
They know we can.
Yeah. Awesome. Really appreciate that we brought up public record requests, because the last thing we want with all of this data that we could conceivably create is the opportunity for people to weaponize public records requests against people. Like, and public record requests are, I mean, this is incredibly important because this is how we provide accountability and openness and transparency in government. So I guess any way, and we've had this conversation, so I'm not going to just ask like how we do it, but like any way that we can balance openness and accountability on our end and protecting the people we serve that are caught up in that, like, please do that.
Yeah, I think that is our North Star, is making sure that we're absolutely doing our best to provide the best service possible to the community that we serve. I will say that I am merely the chief law enforcement officer. I am not the chief lawmaker. So we are bound by RCW, WAC, that really kind of governs how we do things. And if those things change, we will adhere to those as well. So just knowing my lane.
It's good to know your lane. Also, just want to co-sign loved Councilmember Aldrich's suggestion on adding employment status and housing status to those.
I definitely like
classes.
those. Yeah, we can incorporate those.
That's awesome. That's all I got.
I'll just say, this is not the first time that Bothell PD has led our region in doing something. And so I really just admire that you are being proactive in this way. And I do hope that like Racer, that other local law enforcement agencies and even broader national law enforcement agencies will be looking to this example and learning and from your work here. So thank you.
Well, I really appreciate that, but it is a team effort. I mean, the conversations
You
we have.
collectively, Bothell PD, not you individually. Come on. You knew that what I meant.
I'm just saying, though, that a lot of this came from conversations I've had with people at the table here, as well as those in the community. And so that's good information to have, and that helps us frame how we provide our services. So thank you.
Not everybody listens. So
You talk to my kids.
no, but please do, you and the entire department feel appreciated. Like, because like we have led on things, and I really appreciate that, and you guys are responsive, and so please do in general, but also specifically for this, just feel appreciated, because we appreciate you.
I add just one thing. I am proud of our police department. You model integrity like nobody I know. So stay the course.
We try. Thank you.
All right. Oh, we're not adjourned, because we have an executive session, and I have a script
Thank you, everybody.
that I should read. Thanks, guys. All right, it is now 10:05 PM, and council will adjourn to executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1G, performance review of a public employee, that guy. Council will be in executive session for 30 minutes and will adjourn from the meeting from there at 10:35 PM.